We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We have a bit of an anomaly this week. We have considerably fewer questions that came in this week than we normally get.
Short episode,
it
baby. It
might be, although then we say that and we're like, oh, so we don't have to rush through things, and then we're going to end up with like 5 questions left anyway. That's how it usually goes with us.
That's fine with me. Either way.
We still have a good topic list, but it's like 8 questions instead of 12. What happened?
I don't know. Maybe we finally finished it. Maybe we're at the end of the internet.
We have reached the end of AV time.
Between me writing every answer to every question I can find on Reddit.
That's right.
On AV gadgets. Like just search for your question as you might phrase it, and it should pop up as an article title on AV gadgets. And this podcast, we may have finally we completed a home theater.
That's right. We've completed the sacred timeline, and the only thing to do now is to branch off and to go into other multiversal AV timeline worlds.
So I will say, before we get started with the podcast, there may be some, and they're not by me, there is going to be some extraneous noises on my end.
Yeah.
There are a considerable number of people in my front yard right now, and let me tell you why.
Okay.
So, this weekend, Lee... who is I guess we know his last name on this podcast, right? We do
all the time, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lee Overstreet.
Lee Overstreet and his spouse were in town for a convention, and they came by for dinner on. We came by and we went out for dinner. My house is still under construction.
Yeah.
So we went out for dinner, which was very, very good.
Nice.
Seafood place. He said we can go anywhere you want, and I suggested the place. He goes, but I meant seafood. I was like, all right, so this is already going well. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that my mind reading skills are just as poor with you as they are with my wife.
I mean, I can kind of see it. Like Alabama, I guess they don't have access to the freshest of seafood at all times.
Honestly, yeah. When you say I don't care where we go, that means you don't care. But apparently,
there was an asterisk.
The asterisk, an invisible asterisk. But anyways, we went out to a seafood place, which I almost never go out to because I cook seafood because it's here. Right. I just buy it and cook it, but I'm not cooking it.
And when you cook it at home, it is definitely considerably less expensive than buying it at a restaurant.
It is. So we went out and had dinner and came back here, and Lee couldn't stop talking about his stupid car, which is stupid. And
I mean, he has a whole X account for it, so, you know.
He does. Does he? That's dumb.
Yes.
Anyways, he also, there was this time of year, I block Lee on Facebook because he talks about nothing but football. And of course, there's a football game going on. And they were showing it at the restaurant. So it was a whole freaking thing.
Oh, okay. They were showing the Alabama game at a Florida restaurant?
There wasn't anything else on, I guess.
Okay. I mean it's college football.
They love college football.
Oh, I know they do in Alabama. I'm just surprised that game was on in a Florida restaurant. Were they playing a Florida team? Is that what was going on?
No, I don't think there was any other games going on that were nearby. I don't.
There are a lot of. I suppose Florida would not have
people.
put the hockey game on.
No, they would not have. Though at certain places they would.
You would think. Florida Panthers are a good team. They get to the final quite often.
Where are they out of?
Tampa Bay has won the cup 3 years out of 4 or whatever it was.
True,
I mean,
yes.
you got
my son's supposed to be going to a Lightning game this Thursday, I think. So I've been to a Lightning game a couple of times. I like it. I like watching hockey. It's just fine. It's just cold. Anywho, so and the evening finally comes to an end, and they're about to drive back to their hotel, which is in Tampa, which is a good ways away. And his wife asks to use the restroom before she leaves, which is common. I mean, everybody does that.
Very reasonable, yes.
So they drive off, right? So they drive off, and then my son goes to use the restroom, and the toilet is clogged.
Oh, dear.
And I'm like, did Lee's wife just drop an atomic bomb in my toilet and then stroll out the door as quickly as possible so that it wouldn't be found until they left? Is that what has happened here?
I haven't talked to
is that
Lee's
what's
wife
going on? And I'm like,
very
oh my
much,
God.
but that
how
seems unlikely.
how am I going to address this with Lee? Like, how am I going to bring it up? Well, clearly I'm going to mention it on the podcast, and that's how he's going to find out. That's how he's going to find out about it, right?
The classiest way.
Is there any other way? So we do the whole thing. Like, I've got both the plunger and I have a snake. One of those, not like a full size industrial one, but like like an 8 or 6 or 8 foot snake that I can do. And she absolutely did not do anything wrong. Yeah. I mean, it just seemed that way at first, and I was like, Jesus, what's going on? So I'm like, oh, I don't, what happened? So we just like, okay, well, I guess we can't use that toilet. I don't know what's happening. Yeah. So the next morning I wake up and everything's back to normal. The toilet works. Everything's fine. A couple of days later, and my wife texts me and she says, hey, there's a big hole in our front yard. Our next door neighbor called the city because they were having problems with their toilets. And apparently there's a blockage in the main line or whatever. Okay. And that's so it wasn't Lee's wife. No. Luckily.
Unless she caused it for the whole neighborhood.
Maybe she wrecked it. Because let me tell you, not only did she wreck it for my house and my neighbor's house, but she broke the main pipe.
That could
They're out there replacing the pipe right now.
Yep.
So I was like, can you imagine?
What other event could have affected the plumbing in your neighborhood? It could be nothing else.
Nothing else.
Nothing recently has had a major
Tell you what,
impact.
It's all that watching all that football.
Yeah.
It just messes up your intestinal tract, and then it just spreads it on and it just pays it forward. So, no, it wasn't Lee's wife, which is hilarious. But I was like, I'm like, we can't have them over anymore because if they have them over again,
oh my goodness,
they're not allowed to use the bathroom. We're gonna be like, well, you can come in for 15 to 20 minutes, but all of our bathrooms are broken. Don't use them. No, so it is the pipes in our. In fact, my wife works for the city. Yeah. And she has already told me that all the pipes in our neighborhood, like not just my particular neighborhood, but like the surrounding neighborhoods are all like
fabulous.
50, 60, 70 years old. Yeah. They're all cast iron and they're falling apart. There's a big plan to go through and just like basically dig up everything and redo everything in our neighborhood. Yeah. And right now what they're having to do is when these things happen, they have to come out and do a patch job. So yesterday they came out and they discovered what it was. And then today is the crew that actually does the fixing. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you right now, there is just an enormous amount of people in my front yard right now. And there's like, I don't want to go out there because I can only imagine how it smells, but there's like water spewing out of the ground.
Fabulous.
There's a guy, I just walked out there, or I looked out the window, I didn't walk out there. But there's a guy with like it looks like a hose on a stick, and he's got it stuck in the ground, and there's just it looks like a geyser.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like, Jesus. Like, I don't know
Something
how
wasn't
much
going where it was supposed to go.
I don't know how much these people get paid. It cannot possibly be enough.
Right.
Like when you're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I remember I knew a garbage man in San Francisco way back when I was in college in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. And he told me how much he got paid. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. And then he looked at me and goes, I am a garbage man. I'm like, yeah, it's probably not enough. He goes, it's not. It's not. You do not know what I have to deal with. So, yes. Anyways, lovely visit with Lee.
Yes.
Well, lovely visit with Lee.
There could be noise on the back of this podcast, although you have a good microphone, and that does a great deal to help.
I mean, plus there's construction going on across the street this morning. Like, through my headphones, I was like, what is this bass I'm hearing? And it was just like containers hitting each other at like Mach 5. Boom, boom.
Like, I'm hoping not everybody got their like flooded foundations in your neighborhood fixed, because I don't want to jinx anything, but I can only imagine one house at least is gonna like have something resulting from all this sewer line repair.
Oh no. There's already been that. Like
there you go.
The house next door to my parents' house slid. Like it's sliding, like the whole foundation slid and then cracked or something like that.
It would be prone to do that when sliding. Yeah,
oh
my goodness,
it's a deal. It is a deal. So yes.
Well, there you go, folks. I mean, give a thank you to Tom for being here whatsoever. Ridiculous.
Yeah, you should. I mean, I could actually show you because you can see. Right. There's just you can't. You can look out my front windows. You see a few bushes that survived the flooding because most of them died from all the salt water.
Yeah,
and then you can't see the street for all the trucks in front of my house. There's just trucks and trailers and you know how. And I am not insulting anybody or whatever, but I know that there's reasons for this. But there's like one dude with a pipe thing, you know, with the geyser of water, and 4 or 5 other people just standing around holding shovels and watching them.
Oh, sure.
Jeez.
Well,
a lot of people out there.
There are.
All right, Rob, what did you watch this week?
Oftentimes, it's like, what else are they supposed to do? But yeah,
they got
the silver lining being that at least it's a sign of progress of some sort of work being accomplished. So
I get new pipes.
We'll take that as the positive.
Thank you, Lee's wife.
That's right.
For wrecking my pipes so I get new ones.
Very good. Yes, so on to what we watched there. I'm going to talk about first the one movie that I watched this week, which was The Pope's Exorcist. So that is starring Russell Crowe, and he is the only person I recognized in this movie, and it's very much he as the lead, playing a very affable version of a real-life person. He's playing Father Gabriel Amorth, who was really the Vatican's lead exorcist, an actual position, and he a real-life person who was in that role, I think until 2016 is when they said he retired. So he's written several books, and ostensibly this is not an adaptation of any of those books. They just say inspired by the writing of. And so, I mean, I think I'll start a bit with my comment of the end of the movie first, which is just that I don't know this explicitly. I didn't look enough into the production of this movie to know if this is true, but the way that the movie literally ends, it felt very much like the director or writer or, you know, the people making the movie were actually trying to apologize to the audience to say, we know he wrote books, we wanted to adapt the book, but some stuff got in the way of us doing an adaptation of the book, and this is the movie. It was as if they were trying to reach through the screen and tell you, like, we know this isn't what any of the fans of the books wanted this to be, and there was interference, because that's what this movie felt like. This movie was an absolute, for the majority of it, paint by the numbers Exorcist ripoff movie. It was like, it was as if the studio heads got in there and they're like, well, can you have their heads spin around, and can you have them puke, and can you have them talk in Latin? Like, can you just do all of the exact copy of the
paint by numbers version of the Exorcist,
which,
yes.
From the bit that I know, I haven't read through any of Father Gabriel Amorth's books. I don't know everything there, but from the bit that I know and read up on him afterward, the definition of an exorcism under the Vatican is different than the movie version of an exorcism. And it's quite literally going there and praying over any malady. That is considered an exorcism. And so when he says that he's performed like 160,000 exorcisms, it's not like, you know, The Exorcist with like the spinning heads and the people crawling across the ceiling, demonic possession. It's like he went to people and prayed over their maladies. And he says like he has sometimes performed over 1,000 exorcisms on one person, you know, because they had multiple or ongoing maladies, and it's like each individual prayer is considered an exorcism. So, you know, there's all of that, and that's explained in his books. That said, he has claimed in his memoirs, the real life person, that he has performed, I think it was 93 or 94 demonic possession exorcisms. Like, flat out says that he believes they really were demonic possession and performed that many out of 160,000 or whatever, 93, right? So he's saying like obviously the vast majority of exorcisms are not demonic possession, and that in over 98% of the people that he's ever prayed over, he has referred them to psychologists, to psychiatrists, to doctors. Like, that's what he does. And then the idea that, I mean, it's essentially pop psychology, where it's like the act of having done the prayer and having someone who came officially from the Vatican to pray over you gave many people relief. And I would believe that is absolutely believable to me. So that's the real life person and the books. And I mean, whatever you might believe, whatever I might believe personally, that's real life. Those things happen, and he wrote about it in his memoirs. But this book is like none of that. Or this movie rather is like none of that. It is absolute copying. Now, I feel really kind of badly for the young boy who is the object of the demonic possession in this movie, because you're never gonna live up to the Exorcist and the performance. What was it, Linda Blair, right? You're never gonna live up to that. This poor boy, like the real life actor, I mean, he was hauntingly skinny. So I like, my goodness, this poor boy, just in real life. But it was kind of like, well, you know, what is it really going to? I mean, it's a pale imitation of the Exorcist movie, the original. So it just comes across as, you know, kind of hokey, and they have the male adult voice, you know, overlaid on top of his voice and all that type of stuff. And then it's like, well, it is R-rated. There's some nudity. They try to do the shocking language, but they don't go as far as the original Exorcist movie did. So it's like, well, what are you even doing here, right? Like, you either have to go further or you have to go at least as far. If you do anything less, then it feels like you kind of pulled it all back, which is how this movie felt. So the good parts of this movie are Russell Crowe is very, very likable in this role. He's very, very affable. And then towards the end of this movie, it was as if the studio heads, or maybe this is the way the original script was written, got in there and said, can we make this like a cinematic universe? Because they basically set up the future demonic possessions that they're going to have to travel the world to perform their exorcisms on. And it felt so...
Were they trying to make Constantine? They just forgot about it? They forgot that that's what they were doing? Because that's what it sounds like.
So, I mean, I do not think I'm a bad yardstick for this reaction, as I have explained in the past, but I was laughing at many parts of this movie. I was just like, oh my goodness, that is bad, or that is just not I think what they were going for. But like I say, it certainly felt in the literal last moments of this movie that the filmmakers were well aware of that and basically tried to apologize for everything you'd just watched.
We promise not to make another movie. I know it seems like we're going to, but if they make one, it won't be us.
It seemed like. So I certainly can't recommend this as a good movie in and of itself. In a vacuum, if you've never seen a movie that deals with movie style exorcism before, I guess there'd be something to that. But if you've seen any other movie that involves an exorcism, there's nothing new here.
That is a problem, right? That we have to remember as like old people, is that there are plenty of kids out there that have never seen
this will be the very
Jaws,
first time,
right? And they're like, the Meg is, that was pretty good. I'm like, or whatever the version of the remake of not remake, but the reimagining of one of the earlier movies. My kids have done that to me a couple of times, where they see a movie, they're like, oh my god, that was so original, amazing. And I'm like, I remember this girl who was babysitting my kids was like, oh, Lady Gaga whatever. I'm like, she's
so innovative.
Madonna? I mean, and I'm sure that there's a version before Madonna that I'm not aware of, but I grew up with Madonna. So we have to remember that somebody's going to see this movie and be like, oh, it's,
And you know what? The audience score on this was quite high. The critical score on it was low. It's a movie with a big spread between the critics and the audience. So it very much could be that case. Now, I do want to say, on a technical level, as a demo movie for some sound, there are some great scenes in here. And it does have an Atmos mix, because they have voices coming from all over the room. And if you want some of that, having sounds come from distinct directions and channels and things like that, it does that quite well. It is technically nicely and well made. And the acting, like I say, it's affable and enjoyable enough to watch. So, if you just want to watch it on that way, I'm not like angry that I saw it, but I certainly can't say it's a good movie. I did have to comment though. There's a mother and a daughter and a son in this movie, and the mother and the daughter staying in this like sort of run down, used to be a church, I think, or something like that. They're always shivering, and they're always cold, and they're always like hugging themselves to try and stay warm and stuff. I'm like, then why were you sleeping in your underwear? And it's not that they really did it for like the sex appeal or something like that. They don't make it like overtly sexual or whatever, but they have the mother and the daughter sleeping in their underwear the whole time, and then they get up and they're cold, and I'm like, there is something you could have done about that. You could have planned for that. So anyway, moving on, just wanted to mention, I started up Only Murders in the Building Season 3. I think I'm 3 episodes into that. Meryl Streep is joining this season, and Paul Rudd is joining this season, so of course it's going to be entertaining. It's pretty hard not to be with that cast and crew that they've got going on there. So having a lot of fun with that, and then continuing on with Loki Season 2, of course, and 3rd episode of that as well, I think, is where we're up to in there. I wanted to mention, watching this 3rd episode of Loki Season 2, of course, it's on Disney Plus, and for me in Canada, Only Murders in the Building is also on Disney Plus. So watching Only Murders in the Building, it was the typical thing I've gotten used to with Disney Plus. I have my volume dial turned up about, +7 or +8 from where I normally have it for other sources. For whatever reason, episode 3, and so far episode 3 only of Loki Season 2, was 6 or 7 decibels louder than everything else on Disney Plus. It was basically where it should be if it was the same reference volume as all the other things, but episode 1 and 2 weren't. They were still quieter, and Only Murders in the Building was still quieter, so I don't know what's exactly going on with Disney Plus's volume levels, but episode 3 of Loki, I was like, because I turned it up ahead of time knowing I was watching on Disney Plus, and practically got blown out of my seat, because like, holy cow, that's definitely 6 or 7 decibels louder than the previous episodes. So there we go on the technical side. What did Tom watch?
I discovered Combat Juggling, which I had never heard of before. I don't know how I came across it, which is, and I watched a little bit of that, which there's a reason I don't think it's caught on all that much.
Okay.
As far as, I couldn't find anything recent. I don't know if the people still do it, but it's sort of like, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's sort of like football, soccer, but you have to juggle the entire time. And juggling is the point of it. So, anyways, it's dumb, but
still
it was
a little
interesting.
Confused. Exactly. Like I can imagine.
Just Google it, because I don't want to explain the whole thing. So it's really not worth it. You're going to spend a few minutes watching it and go, that's interesting, and then you're going to go on with your life.
All right.
Almost done with Rebels.
Yes.
Right? I can definitely tell I am at the end of season 4.
Yes.
Like Rob said, they forgot they were making the kids show, and they also forgot that it was supposed to be episodic, because it's been like one long story. I will say that I think at the end of season 3 or like beginning-ish of season 4, they got away from using John Williams stuff.
Right.
Right. So, and you maybe not noticed it right at first, but I noticed that the first couple of seasons of this show, it is like nigh impossible to make a cartoon or really a movie or anything with John Williams music behind it that lives up to the music.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying? The music is so dramatic, and then it's just a cartoon dude running across a field. You're like, it overshadows the action that's on there. So there's a pivotal scene where there's a big rescue attempt in season 4, and there is a moment. Maybe it wasn't during the rescue attempt. It might have been during a fight scene. But there is a moment in that arc there where they go back to John Williams' music. You hear that classic Star Wars theme, and you're like, oh my God, this is an important moment. And it totally works. It completely works. But then, within the rest of it, like it used to be every time the Rebels logo comes up, there was a specific sound, and it goes away. During season 4, for sure. And that's very dramatic. And then they changed the color scheme and everything towards the end of the season. So I really feel like, as far as the people who are making it, and I know What's his name, Dave
Filoni,
is one of the main creative minds behind it. But I know there's other people involved as well. The maturity that I'm seeing as far as them being storytellers is like, I think there's 2 things going on. One, they are capable of telling a story better and more dramatically, and I think more interestingly than they were at the beginning of this run of this cartoon. But also, I feel like they're having enough success or enough confidence or enough, maybe just capital to push back on whoever it was above them, telling them, use the John Williams stuff. Yeah, it's Star Wars. Right. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do this. And they're now starting to push back against that and create their own.
Yeah, having a bit of leeway. Stories. Yeah. Plus, being the final season, and they knew it was the final season going in. There's a bit of, well, we can kind of do this because we don't have to worry about getting renewed for another season, right?
Yeah, and it's I think that. Very rarely do I see a show where I feel like it's got a consistent upwards trajectory. And for the most part, other than the character of Ezra, who I still hate, who I still wish somebody would push off. It's kind of like he is the Diana Troy of the show as far as I'm concerned. I'm like, my brother and I used to make the joke all the time about Star Trek: Next Generations, where we were like the first step of any encounter with a new race should be put Troy into a shuttle and shoot her out there and see what happens. And it's not the actress.
Right.
It's not the performance. It's not even really the writers. I just didn't like the whole empath thing. Okay. I just didn't like the whole thing. It was just, and I don't know that you could do much with it other than like, well, what else is she supposed to do? She can feel people's emotions. I can, I don't know. It was so dumb. Anyways, so same thing with Ezra. We need to shoot him out of a cannon at everybody and see what happens. But the upward trajectory, especially end of season 3, beginning of season 4, or the season 4 completely, I think has been worth watching. So if you're like, I don't want to spend this much time going through this stupid cartoon,
yep, that's exactly it.
I'm with you. I understand that thought. This one does pay off, I feel like. This one does have enough. I mean, I haven't seen that last episodes yet, so I don't know, but I'm very much towards the end. I think, how many episodes are in season 4?
15, I think.
Yeah, I'm like on 12 or
15 or something. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're definitely towards the
end.
So
I'm right there at the end.
Since you have paused on watching Ahsoka until you're completing Rebels, I mean, I think you're easily going to agree going through Ahsoka now that it's like, okay, yeah, it definitely has a lot of backstory is Rebels. It's completely unavoidable. Like I say, Ahsoka is really Rebels season 5.
Right. I disagree with you though that they kind of forgot about the quote unquote romance or relationship between Hera and
it comes back in season 4. I felt
but
like
it doesn't just come back though, because I was maybe it's because I was looking forward to a little bit more, but there were like little moments of it throughout.
I'm not saying it went away. It seemed to like dial back for seasons 2 and 3. Like she wasn't just like referring to him as love in seasons 2 and 3. I'm like, what happened to that? Why did that go away? So, and they never. During seasons 2 and 3, they never really focused on their relationship for maybe there was a reason she stopped referring to him as love. Maybe it was because she was being sort of, introduced into the rebellion that's growing and felt like she had to be more militaristic or something like it's easily explained, but there was nothing focusing on that in seasons 2 and 3.
All right. Let's get this podcast started.
Yeah.
Finally. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to our website, find our show notes as well as our Flickr album so you can follow along with the pictures that we will be referring to. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. Contact Rob directly. Rob@avrant.com is Twitter's or X's, or I don't even know what you do anymore. Anyways, so
not many people have come over to Threads, so I can't. I mean, that is where I'm trying to be, but not everyone is joining me. So yes, First Reflect. That's my handle. If I'm on a service, that's what I'll be.
Yeah. I am Tom at avrant.com, and I do not do other social media right now. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. And we want to thank Kevin for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for your PayPal donation. We appreciate your financial support.
We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/avrant podcast. It's a service that you can sign up to become a monthly contributor to our podcast. So we have 136 patrons over at patreon.com. Thank you very much.
Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So holding steady there at 136 patrons. And thank you all very much for your support.
If you can't support us financially, find some other way to support us, and we will mention you here. So Eddie tried to send a movie code to Rob to test out to see whether or not it worked, but it didn't work.
No, because it did not work in Canada. Does not work in my region.
That's right. It was a U.S. only one, so I checked it out, and Eddie, don't worry, it works.
That's right.
If you're wondering. Thank you
Thumbs
very much.
up. Thank you, Eddie.
We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through everything. So we've got J.Karl, Julian. Julian says we're his favorite podcast. And yes, he spelled it with a U because it's spelled incorrectly here. So I guess he must be Canadian or some crap. And Vince, who says that back in June, we suggested going with this LG C2 OLED so that he could check every single box for his Xbox Series X and PS5. He waited a few months, and this weekend he picked up a LG C3 instead of a C2. Just want to say thank you. It is working as promised. Every single check mark is green, and it's a beautiful TV. So thank you, J.Karl, Julian, and Vince, for thanking us.
You betcha, J.Karl, Julian, Vince. Thank you very much for your notes of encouragement and gratitude. We very much appreciate it. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. I do believe Julian is in the UK, so that is why he would spell favorite correctly with
incorrectly,
the U
how you look at
as it ought to be. That's right.
The U is silent. I mean, why would you even want to? We have a bunch of stupid silent letters I wish we could get rid of.
I do.
But why would we need more?
Those letters are
aluminium people.
Those letters are only for the page. They are not for our mouths. They exist to be seen but not heard.
They're like children. In the news, we talked about Zappiti's announcement that they are shutting down their video player software and database will no longer work by the end of the year. But in a super trustworthy and not at all suspicious move, a new brand, R_Volution.
Yes, which they do want to be pronounced as revolution, but refuse to spell it in such a way.
Well, it's a silent E, so it's
absolutely. Well, this is an utterly removed E that has been.
It's a removed E. It's an invisible
with an
E.
underscore.
That's right. You have to put it in there. It's just appeared offering their R-Volution. I'm not going to say it with an E because there's no E there.
Mm-hmm.
That was very loud.
There were noises. I heard something back there. Not particularly loud on my end, but something was going on.
Offering the R-Volution PlayerOne and R-Volution NAS and Disc Ripper that bear a striking resemblance to Zappiti's products. In the U.S. and Canada, they're distributed by Let's Get Physical Distribution, Inc., which you might recall is a company that's now handling all warranty claims for Zappiti. So,
putting two and two together here, real sleuthing going on. Yeah.
Sounds like somebody's trying to clear out some inventory. Shane Lee got the scoop that current Zappiti owners will supposedly have the option to change their software over to the new Android-based R-Video, which is R_video.
Yeah, there's not re-video, so the underscore doesn't always stand for an E.
I don't know. Our Video Media Center, but it will be a $50 annual subscription cost to do so. Whether our Revolution's new PlayerOne will require a subscription is not clear at the moment, but let's just say if you like gambling, that's the way to go. If you want your money to be spent on something that will actually do something in the year,
right?
You should maybe wait a little while.
So, I mean, this is tough because if you had purchased one of the most recent Zappiti players, they were not cheap. They were over $1,000 players. Like Jeez. I say, I had a Zappiti, but I had the Zappiti Mini, which was going back many years at this point before they supported Dolby Vision or anything like that. But the Zappiti Mini was a couple of $100, and so I don't feel that bad. If I stop using that and replace it with a Zadu or a Dune or something like that, I'm okay with that. But yeah, if you had purchased one of the most recent Zappiti players, they were well over $1,000. I think the top of the end one was over $2,000. And so then it's like, okay, I don't think you're going to feel like replacing that player with the Revolution player. That would seem to not make a lot of sense. Therefore, giving some sort of way to stop your Zappiti player from just turning into a local only, can't download any new metadata player where you're basically just going through a file explorer tree to pick your movies and play them. Rather than doing that, having some method of at least putting the new Revolution R-Video software on it and using it. $50 a year, I mean, obviously it's not ideal, but it's not that bad in the scheme of things, so I can see how it all sort of totals up. I obviously don't think I would trust and recommend anyone rush out and buy a Revolution system. I mean, especially the NAS with the built-in ripper, which was the thing that got Zappiti shut down because they got, as you could understand, sued over this automated ripping process of discs, which is definitely going to go against many laws in many countries. So the fact that they're like prominently showing it on the new Revolution page and being like, yeah, this is one of our products, I'm honestly kind of surprised at that, because frankly, if all they did was sell the new PlayerOne, the rebadged Zappiti as now the Revolution PlayerOne, if that's all they sold, I don't know that they'd really have too much problem with that, because the idea that you're playing back local files of essentially any file format, it's like, you know, our computers do that. You know, it's like you're basically saying, yeah, that's what I'm using this play for. Obviously, there are going to be people who are using it for pirated content or stuff that broke copyright protection in order to make it, but that isn't the player inherently. That's not what the player does inherently. It just plays a whole bunch of different file formats and pulls down metadata and gives you an interface for it. But the NAS with the built-in ripper, I mean, that's unquestionable. It's right there in terms of it automates the ripping process of copyrighted discs. That they don't even make any bones about it. So I'm a little surprised that they're continuing on with that. I'm a little surprised they're promoting that on their website. Like Tom says, they probably just still had stock of these things and wanted to find a way to sell them.
That's what I think of this. I mean, you see this constantly, right? Yeah. Like some company goes out of business and some other company pops up with a rebadged version of it. And this is like, we're totally going to support it forever.
That's right. Yeah. So I would have to warn away. I don't think I'm going to be recommending that anybody invest in a Revolution system. But if you already spent the money on a Zappiti, at least the idea that it isn't just going to become a paperweight, costing $50 a year. Okay. I mean, basically it's maybe you do that for a year or two until you find a viable alternative solution. And it's, I guess, better than that.
I'll tell you that company is going to be just like that underscore. It's going to be invisible in very little time once you buy their product. All right, the Connectivity Standards Alliance, or CSA. I'm sure this is the only company or organization in the world that has the acronym CSA. So feel free to Google that, and I'm sure they're the only thing that will come up is
particularly in Canada. There's also
has now released its Matter 1.2 specification 1 year after launch of Matter 1.0. 9 new device types can now be controlled, at least in terms of the most basic functions, by any Matter controller, including all of the major voiced assistants. Matter 1.0 included lights, switches, plugs, locks, thermostats, blinds, security sensors, and media devices. Matter 1.2 adds refrigerators, in-room air conditioners, dishwashers, laundry machines, robot vacuums, smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, air quality sensors, air purifiers, and fans.
Appliances, for the most part.
But despite there being over 600 companies in the CSA and this update to the specification having been in the works for a year, no new products have officially been announced with the Matter 1.2 support. And the major voice assistants have said that adding support for all of these devices, these new device types, will happen over time and be a gradual process. And stop emailing us.
But
we're working on it, and by working on it, we've got one guy.
I want to control my Roomba now by talking to it.
Listen, until we get some more interns, we cannot guarantee that there's going to be any more adoption of this crap. Controlling more advanced functions and digging into specific product settings still requires individual apps for each product. For example, a Matter 1.2 controller can tell your robot vacuum when to turn on or change or charge, or send a notification to your phone, but it can't map your home, which is a vital part of the setup process, and will still require the robot vacuum's own app. Some companies have said that existing products can be updated via firmware to support Matter 1.2, but again, nothing has officially been announced yet, and overall support for Matter in general seems to be slow or waning. Let me tell you, the name is the biggest problem.
It's part of it.
I'm going to tell you. Like, I know what they were going for. All right. The word's too dang common. Okay. It's just too common. No one knows what you're talking about. Like, as I'm reading this out loud, I'm like, I don't know what I'm saying. You can't hear the capital M in Matter to know that is a proper noun and not just me saying the word.
It's a bit like that company Nothing. That I refuse to even consider any of their products, even if they're good. I just, on principle, for my own edification and just grudge that I hold. Refuse to even consider any of their products just because of what they named their company.
Yeah, it's dumb. So while Matter 1.2 adds device categories for several large appliances, you might notice that smart ovens are still missing, probably because of that whole natural gas thing or whatever it was that everybody's mad about here in the United States. Like, don't pay attention to the fact that our economy is screwed and people are homeless and they can't make enough money to live, but they're going to take away your gas stoves. 15 of the largest major appliance brands have gone ahead and made their own home connectivity alliance, the HCA.
That's
which again,
right.
Google that. It'll be the only one that pops up, which is yet another interoperability standard and a competitor to Matter. The HCA aims to let member brands control each other appliances using the branded app of their choice, rather than having to cede control to a Matter controller or, as in the case of LG, demand that their products can act as Matter controllers, but cannot be controlled by any other brand of Matter controller. This is all dumb. Bottom line, this is a much-needed advancement for Matter and generally good news overall, but the dream of consumers being able to buy any smart home product and simply have it connect and work with whatever else they already own still seems to have many, many challenges ahead. Okay. Let's just talk about this in general for a second, because first of all, this is all dumb. I don't care about any of this. This is just dumb. This is it. But the reality, we want two things at the same time. And what the first thing we want is we want there to be competition, right?
Sure.
We want there to be different products that do the same thing in slightly different ways, so that they will compete against each other, and it will lower prices, in theory, lower prices and increase quality at the same time. So,
and very often even just aesthetic choices, right? Like if I'm picking out light switches or outlets or doorbells or whatever, I want a variety of aesthetic choices, and I don't expect a single company to provide every choice that I might want.
Right. At the same time, we also want to have those products all work together seamlessly so that it is easiest for us as end consumers, right? Those two things are mutually exclusive. You cannot have both because those companies invariably you have pitted them against each other in competition, and then you ask them to work together. Now, I agree that I think that all this stuff should work together, right? But in order to do that, you need to have one company, one something at the very top, like the HDMI, right? At the very top, who has basically cornered the market in control, and then everybody says, okay, well, we'll use you because there's no other option out there. But the minute you have one company that's doing that, another company's going to go, well, we can do it better than that. Yeah. And then you have competition again, and here we are. Or you end up with HDMI, which is like, we're just going to put the standard out there, and we're going to, you guys kind of implement it however you want. We don't want to tell you what to do too much, because the minute you do, that's when, we're not going to tell you have to use our name, right? Which is why we have HDMI CEC has 15 different names. Yes. Right? And then everybody's confused again, because you have to give the companies a certain amount of control or leeway, or they just won't use your stuff. Yeah. So these things are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, the other end of it is, something gets to the point where it's like a government law or a mandate that comes, like, for example, the electrical outlets that we have. Now, across the world, we have different electrical outlets. You have to buy an adapter at the very least, or sometimes an entire transformer to go between different voltage standards in different countries. But, like, say, just within the United States, you go into any building and it's going to have normal for North America, 120 volt outlets. And that is like a standard that didn't necessarily come to that out of just market forces or competition. It was like at some point government got involved and just said, that's the outlet that we're all going to use. And sure enough, somebody's going to say, well, I can make a smaller one, a more efficient one, whatever, but it just doesn't happen at this point. There's like government oversight of that thing. So, some people in the United States and particularly in other countries and in Europe and that have been saying, like, when it comes to this whole smart home thing, like the people who are coming at it from the side of smart home technology ought to be able to help us build much more efficient homes that use a lot less energy, that help us with automation in terms of timing to make sure that we're using electricity at the optimal time, to help us save money, to help us save energy. Like, these are things that government should be interested in helping us do. If we're going to get to that type of goal, from an environmental standpoint, an efficiency standpoint, even a building code standpoint, all of those things, maybe government should be involved and should start saying, okay, it doesn't make sense that if I started out in Apple Home and I bought a bunch of Apple Home products, that I now decide, okay, I prefer to use Amazon's voice assistant or Google's voice assistant, and now I have to replace everything in my house that worked with that original, HomeKit version of it. That doesn't make sense. You should be able to keep what you already have and replace the controller. Alternatively, you should be able to keep the controller and upgrade or replace the individual components, and it shouldn't be necessary to completely lock into incompatible ecosystems. That is tremendously inefficient. That generates a whole bunch of waste needlessly, when functionally these things are providing the same things to you as the homeowner. And then just on the user side of it as a consumer, it's like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. I don't want to have to think about what ecosystem I'm in. If I find a new camera that I particularly like the feature set, it's just the right size, it's the looks that I want, and it's going to be able to go in the location I want and work just perfectly, but oops, turns out doesn't work, or it works only partially, only in its most basic functions, but it's one of the more advanced features that I particularly wanted that model for. But nope, doesn't work with anything else in my house. That's dumb. That's just dumb. And I don't think, even on the competitive market side of things, that helps anybody. How does that help anybody? The companies that love this idea of lock-in, and I'm going to lock you into our ecosystem, it doesn't actually help you when someone says, well, it turns out the one thing that matters to me most, you don't have, so I'm not going to choose anything that you sell. Right. I'm going to completely avoid your brand because of one particular thing that's important to me. That doesn't help. So the reason everybody had a lot of high hopes for Matter as a standard, capital M Matter, is because they got over 600 companies across the industry of every product type to actually sign their names to this CSA group. That's the largest and most comprehensive alliance that has ever been formed in the smart home sector. So that's why there was so much hope behind the at least the notion that it's possible we might get interoperability standards, because everybody who was major signed on, except I think Lutron, which is like one of the biggest lighting companies, I don't think they signed on, which is like, oh man, of course there has to be a holdup. But like, this whole HCA alliance among the major large appliance manufacturers, like that's 15 companies, 15, 1-5. That's it. So like for them, they went off because they're like, Matter's not moving fast enough. We want to get this thing going, so we're going to make our own alliance. And they're like, maybe we'll roll HCA into Matter. We could make that work. But it's like, it always comes back to somebody at some company is like, nope, we want all the data. We want you stuck in our interface. We want to send you ads to our app. And so if you're allowed to use somebody else's app, we're not going to be able to do that. Like, it seems to always come back to that, and they just end up falling apart and trying to create yet another standard. So It's discouraging, but at least Matter hasn't completely died. They're still progressing. They're still making some advancement. I think
inevitably the thing that, if this ever does come to fruition, is going to be that consumers are just going to be like, I'm not going to buy any of your products anymore, and it's simply because
that's what's happening. Like, smart home products should be a faster selling, more popular sector of things. It's still kind of niche, right? Like, the thing is, if you go buy any new house, you don't even necessarily expect that the whole thing is going to be a smart home. That's kind of crazy. It should be at this point. And we should be going in there with the expectation of whatever the builder decided to use, I don't have to worry that the products I buy from now on just aren't going to work with what the builder already put in, which is precisely the reason why most builders are not building smart homes from scratch, because they're like, yeah, either somebody's going to go, I love most of this house, but what I already own for smart home isn't compatible and I'm not willing to buy it all, or they're just confused by it or whatever. It's weird that in today's day and age, every house that's being built is not being made more efficient via smart home products. Obviously some are, but most are not, and that's crazy.
Yeah, be honest with you, it might be the home builders, the construction companies who really push this forward, because they're for exactly what you just described. They're just like, listen, we're putting, these are the products we're putting in houses because they're universal.
Yeah.
And if we're not gonna put your products in, because why would we?
Yeah.
We're just pissing off customers.
It would be like if each home builder had to choose which electrical outlet they were going to put into that house, right?
Yes.
That would be insane. So, we need a proper standard. And in this instance, I do believe it will benefit everyone, because it doesn't stop the different companies still differentiating themselves in terms of aesthetics. They can absolutely still differentiate themselves in that way, or price point, or, just longevity, all those things. They can still compete there. Just the idea that your fridge cannot talk to your fan, cannot talk to your controller, cannot talk to your TV, like that standardization behind everything does need to get in place. Matter seems to be the most promising, but it's not going smoothly.
All right. Let's get to some questions here. Nick is revisiting the PS5 and rumored PS5 Pro topic. So last week, Rob went over how a lot of PS5 games offer 3 different modes for you to choose from. There's visuals mode that goes for maximum beauty and detail with ray tracing turned on. I guess this was a couple of weeks ago.
It was a couple of weeks ago, yeah, that's right.
And the game rendered as close to genuine 4K resolution as possible with expensive frame rate, which is typically aiming for 30 frames per second in this mode. On the opposite end is performance mode that goes for a rock-solid high frame rate, although that's most often 60 frames per second these days, with only a handful of games offering 120 frames per second. But the expense of visual beauty with ray tracing turned off. And then there's often a mode in the middle that Nick thinks should be called compromise mode, but it is usually called something like performance RT, which tries to keep the 60 hertz frame rate while adding some of the ray tracing and visual beauty back, but often requiring lowering the actual rendered resolution of the game. So Nick went looking at a bunch of YouTube videos to compare these modes across a bunch of PS5's AAA game titles, and it appears to him that there's some serious performance gaps. Sure, the PS5 can technically do ray tracing and 4K resolution and high frame rates, but not all at once. And that has really left Nick scratching his head. If you buy a movie on a disc, you don't have to choose between resolution, frame rate, and HDR. So why is it necessary to make that choice when it comes to the latest games? Well, movies are 24 frames per second most of the time, so there's that.
So I guess we can pause here to talk about that just a little bit, because we're talking about pre-rendered versus
rendering on the fly.
Rendering on the fly in real time, and those are very, very different things. So, for example, you could have all the visual beauty and the high frame rate and everything you want in pre-rendered cutscenes in your video game. If they did that. Now, of course, a lot of games today, the cutscenes that you're watching are actually being rendered on the fly in real time. They're using the game engine to render a non-controllable cutscene, but still not pre-rendered, like going back to the original PS1, right? Where you were playing a game like, Resident Evil or Parasite Eve or something like that. And it's like, you've got the game graphics that at that time on the PlayStation 1 were very blocky and all of that type of stuff. And then you would go to these very obvious cutscenes that were, CGI rendered and looked completely different from the gameplay. And those could have all the effects that were possible at the time and the high frame rate and everything. But you go back to the game and now you're reliant on what the processing chips inside of that game console can do in real time. So that's why we really cannot compare something like a movie disc or a television show or any pre-rendered scene to something that's being generated on the fly, has to be calculated in real time by the processing chips.
Right. So this is why he's hoping Rob was wrong in his prediction last week, and that the PS5 Pro really will be released next year, as rumored. Lending credence to that rumor is the fact that the PlayStation Portal handheld and the PS5 Slim redesign were both reported by the same source as the PS5 Pro rumor before they were officially announced. So fingers crossed. Well, I think that was all whatever. But if the PS5 Pro does not come out, does that mean he has to wait until PS6 comes out before he'll be able to play AAA PS5 games without any compromises? Why can't he just play PS5 games at their maximum setting as programmed in the software? It seems crazy. Well, because they want these things to cost a reasonable amount of money, and as far as not the games, the consoles, and they build them years. They design them years ahead of time. With chips that they know exist or know will exist, and the games are programmed much later.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, honestly, and this is not a facetious answer, but it's probably not the answer you want to hear. But you are the candidate for transitioning over to PC gaming, right? Because if you want to be able to render games to their maximum capability or as close to it as you possibly can, PC gaming is that's the crowd that does it, right? And now the flip side to being a PC gamer is you are going to spend more money on the hardware to play your games than being a console gamer.
And not only that, you will be upgrading constantly.
Much more frequently, yes.
Yes, you will also be insufferable to be around immediately.
Some are, yes.
You will immediately become like, I am a PC gamer, I'm a real gamer, and none of the rest of you are real gamers, is what will immediately happen to you, and you will lose all your friendships. So
it is kind of interesting because you have the game developers. There's that side of the industry. And one of the advantages of the consoles is that they are like static hardware. They know exactly what the CPU and the GPU and the amount of memory and the amount of bandwidth and all that is going to be. It's not like PC gaming where there's a huge variety of hardware configurations that are out there. And they basically just need to target, some level of CPU, GPU, memory, and bandwidth performance, and say, okay, that's our ceiling for this game, and we're going to divide things there, and then we're going to have to build in settings sliders to lower all of those settings for people who have PC hardware that can't keep up. On the console side, they can at least say, we know exactly what the CPU and the GPU and all that is going to be. So there is the option for a game developer to pick one console, the PS5, the Xbox Series X, whatever it might be. They pick that one console and they say, okay, we are going to target 120 frames per second, 4K rendering at all times, the most ray tracing that we can do, and we're gonna target all of that, and we're gonna maximize the efficiency. We're going to get every single flop out of that CPU.
Well, that's why back in the day, and I mean, maybe this still happens, but back in the day when you had console-specific games, they looked so much better, and they played so much better than the games that were across multiple consoles. So you would have like the God of War, for example. God of War games would come out, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! Why doesn't everything look like this?" Well, because it's only on the PS5. That's why. That's the only reason.
And that's exactly it. So I mean, look, most of the games out there that aren't from the first-party publishers, they are not targeting a single console. And even if you're saying the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, those are more similar than different. Their performance thresholds, the maximum they can do is more similar than different, and yet they are still different, and there are differences there that have to be programmed for. It isn't as simple as saying, here's my game, now export the PS5 file, and then go back and go export the Xbox Series X file. There's a lot more work that goes into developing the game than that. Microsoft has also kind of screwed things up this generation by having that Xbox Series S, which is considerably less powerful, and demanding that all games that are released on Xbox Series X are also playable on Xbox Series S. We're seeing that right now with Baldur's Gate 3, where that version is like just going to be missing a feature entirely that it has on PlayStation 5 because they couldn't get it working on Xbox Series S, the lower powered hardware. And so there's that whole side of things going on too. But he's saying, okay, I'm looking at the AAA first-party games from PlayStation. They are only releasing it on PlayStation 5. Why can't we just have all the things that this system says it's capable of? Why can't we maximize all of it at the same time? Why do we have to say, okay, if I have maximum visual beauty, I have to decrease the frame rate, or if I have maximum frame rate, I have to decrease the visual beauty, or I have to have somewhere in between and make that choice before I start playing the game? Part of that is they are looking toward the future, and Sony more and more is releasing their first-party games onto PC hardware in addition to the PlayStation 5. It's being developed on developer kits, but very often those are just high-end PCs that they're developing those things on, and they're almost always trying to make the games backward compatible to still be playable on a PlayStation 4 because the user base is just there.
That's the bigger market, honestly.
That is just there. So this idea of do I have to wait for a PlayStation 6 before I can turn the sliders up to maximum on every PlayStation 5 game? Even that's a losing battle because, first of all, that option might not even be there unless the developer of that game goes back and puts those options in. It might not have been there before. They might have to remaster the game for the future console. You were just constantly chasing after that maximum threshold and literally never achieving it for every game. PC gamers face this too, right? They get closer to being at the maximum, but inevitably the next game comes out and you can't quite get to what that game can do maximally unless you upgrade your GPU yet again. And you do that every single year and you're still chasing after it. So it's what I want to get at here is this is a mindset problem more than, I'm not disagreeing that it would be nice to just have a guarantee that you're always getting maximum everything, but realistically that just isn't going to happen, and you will only drive yourself crazy trying to get there or demanding that I'm never going to buy a gaming console until it has that guarantee. You are literally never going to buy a console in that case. Will there be a PlayStation 5 Pro? I mean, you're absolutely right. The same people who had the rumored details of the PlayStation Portal and the PlayStation 5 Slim seem to be correct, and they're giving out details of what they believe the PlayStation 5 Pro will be. I don't know. What I maintain from what I said last time is I have zero doubt that Sony had plans going, right? They're always planning their next console, whether that be a mid-generation refresh or the PlayStation 6. They are working and planning the PlayStation 6 right now as we speak. There is no question about that. But plans definitely can change. Like, it seems to be quite evident now that Nintendo was working on a refresh of the Nintendo Switch, the one that would still be a Nintendo Switch, but a bit more powerful. That seems to be the case. It was right at the time of the pandemic, and we ended up with the Nintendo Switch OLED, where all they did was change the screen. They changed nothing else, but they changed the screen. That came out. There was going to be like a Nintendo Switch Pro or something like that. It seems quite evident. There's a lot of evidence out there now that they really were genuinely working on that, but it just never happened, and now they're not going to do it. There's going to be a Nintendo Switch 2 almost certainly coming out next year, but not a mid-generation refresh. So the possibility of a PlayStation 5 Pro not coming out, I think, is it's like 50-50 to me at this point. I really don't know. Since Microsoft said they're not going to do it, they're not going to do a mid-generation refresh to the Xbox Series X, that they're just standing pat until whatever the next full generation is, that to me says, Sony, I undoubtedly was planning a PlayStation 5 Pro. I have no doubts of that. But whether they'll actually bring it out, I don't know. Because, is there really a market need for it? And I would argue there isn't. Because, like I say, 8K TVs just aren't catching on. It's not like the PlayStation 4 Pro that let you play 4K, and the original PlayStation 4 really struggled with that. So it's a coin flip to me, but end of it advice where he's basically like, should I just buy a PlayStation 5 console this year? Just go buy the games you want to play. Are there games you want to play? And if there are, don't wait. It doesn't make sense to me to just wait, and because, like I said, you will just end up waiting and waiting and waiting. When the PlayStation 6 comes out, you'll be like, yay, the games that got remastered for the PlayStation 5, I can finally play them at 60 hertz with full ray tracing and no compromise there. But it won't play the PlayStation 6 games to their maximums, or it won't equal the PCs of the time.
Yes. Well, and that's always the downside of consoles has always been is that the minute they're released, they were already obsolete compared to PCs.
They're already at least 2 or 3 years old compared to the PCs that are out that day.
If you're looking for like a console that will come out and be cutting edge, it does not exist, and nor will it ever, because they cannot make them to scale the numbers that they need to sell. I mean, look how long it took them to get up to scale, to be able to sell, to have enough PS5s and Xbox Series S and everything for people. I mean, remember how we couldn't buy one?
Absolutely.
I mean, and so they couldn't even this quote unquote obsolete. But the advantage of a console is that you can design specifically for it. And actually, over the lifespan of the console, games tend to get better as far as graphics and everything else, because they get better at optimizing for those specific chipsets.
Look at Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on Switch, this is probably the last full year of this being Nintendo's primary console. We're very much expecting there to be a Nintendo Switch 2 or whatever they're going to end up calling it. I kind of like calling it the Nintendo Switch Up. I think that would be a fun name for the sequel. But, like, you look at Tears of the Kingdom, it's like, how does that game run on a Nintendo Switch, which is like, at this point, is like a 10-year-old cell phone. Like, it's insane how little power there is inside of a Nintendo Switch, and yet Tears of the Kingdom is running on that. It's really remarkable. But, I mean, that's what you can get when Nintendo is not selling Tears of the Kingdom on any other system. It is only Switch, so they can absolutely maximize the efficiency of what that hardware can do for that particular game. So, some games will do that. Most games won't on other consoles. It's really only ever going to be first-party games that are even potentially doing that. But yeah, I want to try and shift Nick's psychology on this a little bit, because otherwise you're just going to be waiting forever and frustrated forever. But honestly, if you want to chase that maximal performance, then I would suggest transitioning to PC gaming. It's really the only way to do that.
Infinite Gary, he says, so how do you go about figuring out exactly what your field of view is given the screen size and distance from eyes to screen? He's tried plugging his figures into some online calculators, but they seem to be rounding the figures. What? Exactly? Round? What? So he's sitting exactly... No, you're not. You're not sitting exactly anything, because you sometimes breathe. And you sometimes sit back in your chair, and you sometimes
I don't know. I've met Gary in person. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he literally sits 100%.
If you do not have a vice that you put your head into, you do not sit exactly anything. So let's just get that word right out of your vocabulary. So he's sitting approximately 6 feet from eyes to screen with a 48-inch OLED. What is his field of view? And Robs will take you through that while I get some more coffee.
Alrighty, so, I mean, look, I don't mind. I actually just quickly drew up a couple of diagrams just to show, a little bit of math, tiny little bit of trigonometry, but that is the way to get the absolute exact figures. I want to start by saying, though, the very first step you need to do is finding out or measuring, if you already own the TV, measuring literally with a tape measure, the actual diagonal, or you could, if you're measuring the TV and already own it, just measure the width of the TV, because that's really what we're going to be using when we're talking about calculating the field of view, is the width of the TV. But assuming this might be a situation where you're preparing to purchase a television, you might notice that, they're going to have the standard screen sizes, 55 inches, 65, 75, but that is like, you'll often see it as like size class of the screen size, and the literal size of the screen in diagonal in inches could be something a little bit slightly different. So for example, he mentions having a 48-inch OLED, and if you look that up, one good resource for that is a site called displayspecifications.com. I was looking through there. They don't necessarily have literally every model of television listed there, but you can usually find one, maybe it's the previous model year or something like that. But displayspecifications.com, if you look it up, the 48-inch OLED is actually 47.6 inches diagonal, right? So they round it up to 48 inches diagonal, but if you were to measure it, the actual diagonal there is 47.6. So you need to start with that. If you're trying to figure out exactly what it is, then you need to know exactly what the size of your screen is. So if you're looking up ahead of time, that's going to be the diagonal, or you could measure the width. But once you have that, then we're going to use some Pythagorean theorem, right? So a squared plus b squared equals c squared of a triangle. We know the hypotenuse. We know that diagonal is exactly 47.6 inches, and we know the aspect ratio of the screen. Now, again, if you have it, you could just measure the width, because ultimately that's what I want to know. But if we're figuring it out and all we have is the diagonal, and you want to know exactly what the width of the TV is in inches, the image size, then we're going to go, well, we know it's 16x squared plus 9x squared, because that's 16 by 9 ratio, but we don't know exactly what the width and length might be at this point. Just figuring it out is going to be 47.6 squared in this case, right? So we just quickly go through the math there and end up taking the square root of x, and we now know...
I'm so glad I came back for this.
That's right. Tom came in just at the right time. But now we know that, having just done that Pythagorean theorem calculation, we have the exact width. Now, I'm going to want half of that width. What we're going to try and do is create a right angle from the line that goes from our eyes to the middle of the TV's width, and I want to know half of the width. So calculate there. 8x, right, is going to be 20.7434 on and on and on inches. That's the exact width of your 48-inch OLED, which is actually 47.6 inches in diagonal. So now we have that 8x. We know that half width of the screen. We're going to use a little bit of trigonometry here, our tangent, and we're going to know that, okay, you said you're exactly 6 feet from eyes to screen. That's 72 inches. Put everything in terms of inches here. So it's going to be 8x, half of the width, over 72 inches. That's going to equal the tangent of half of our field of view angle, but we want to work in right triangles here, so that's going to be the math that we use. So I've got the things listed up there on the screen. You're going to want to come to Flickr to look at, I just put in the exact numbers there that we're working with. I'm not going to say them out loud if we do that, but that way we can work out just using the tangent function, or in fact the inverse tangent function on our calculator. This isn't one I'd want to do by hand. I would definitely want to use a calculator with a tangent and inverse tangent function to work this out, but that way we can figure out that half angle is 16.0719 degrees, and so of course we just double that to get our actual field of view, the full width of the television versus our distance from eyes to screen. And for your 47.6 inch diagonal, the 48-inch screen size class sitting exactly 6 feet away, you'd have a 32.14382 degree field of view. So this is going to be one where it's definitely going to be beneficial to see the calculations that I've written up here, either via YouTube or during the Flickr album. But a little bit of Pythagorean theorem, a little bit of trigonometry, and you can work out exactly what your field of view is, as long as you know the actual diagonal of your screen.
Secondly,
Tom was thrilled. Tom was utterly thrilled.
Captivated.
Absolutely.
Yes, because I don't do enough math with my children in their homework. I actually don't do any because my wife's an engineer and she does it all. Sure. But just hearing it is enough for me. Yes. Gary listens to a lot of podcasts. He watches lots of YouTube videos. Almost all of them at some point say the typical like and subscribe, leave us a comment and a review at some point in every single time, except for ours, because we never say that.
We never say it.
What does that do? He's already watching. Is technology not advanced enough to register that as a view or whatever? Why would clicking on anything further help him in any way? Isn't it simply how many eyeballs and for how long that advertisers care about? It seems to me that you're already on a computer. It seems like this question could have been answered by yourself and then Google. But the reality is that
if you do that, you find a whole bunch of different responses, and especially now with AI responding to everything, you get a bunch of crap in terms of the answers that you get. So he's just asking us, somebody he trusts. So
first of all, the like and subscribe, the likes in general will help with engagement. It tells the algorithm, hey, I like this video, or I like what was presented here, this type of thing, and it will then look at your history, and I mean it probably does a lot of stuff, but looks at your history and says, I will recommend this to people who tend to watch things that you tend to watch, and therefore it will come up. Subscribing just makes sure that when new videos come up from that person, that they will show up in your feed or show up. Like for some of them, I get announcements on my phone. Hey, so-and-so put, especially if I now again, it goes to your viewing habits. If you tend to watch certain videos, like there are certain YouTubers I watch specifically to fall asleep. Like I watch them specifically because I can start their videos and within 5 minutes I'm asleep. Guaranteed, almost always. And it's between the timbre of their voice and what the content that they're doing, I can fall asleep. Other videos I watch religiously, but not to fall asleep. And it's funny that the ones that I do for the sleeping one, those pop up on my phone every single day. Those people do. But the other ones where I do watch them quite often, does not, and it's because the algorithm.
I mean, the ones you're falling asleep to, those videos probably play to completion because you fell asleep.
That's right. Not only to completion, but then it starts another one. And I'll go back and rewatch video. Like if they haven't had anything new in a while, I'm like, I don't know, just pick one. It doesn't matter. I haven't seen most of it. So it's repeat viewing and the entire video rather than maybe you paused or you only watched it once. Yeah. So I mean,
a lot of the like and subscribe part in terms of how that impacts content creators and what they're doing, that is more on the getting recommended to you and other people. It's, I mean, in a roundabout way, it comes back to advertisers, right? Because obviously if people are watching more of your videos, more people are watching your videos and for longer durations, that means you're going to get more advertising dollars, but it's more about attracting and retaining more of your audience. So they're saying, okay, as long as there's interaction here, you're sending a like and subscribe, you're commenting, you're interacting with my video in some way, not just clicking on it and watching it, maybe pausing it halfway through or partway through, maybe never coming back to it again, and that's it.
Well, the other thing when you fall asleep is the ads play all the way through too.
There's right that
that's the big thing.
Because
I skip ads like crazy when I'm actually awake because nobody wants to see them. But when I'm sleeping, who knows what ads I'm seeing?
So I mean, the simple answer is that if all you do is view, and that is your lone interaction with somebody's content, that is like one metric. That's one piece of data. It counts. They absolutely count how many people clicked on a video or clicked on a podcast. They know how long you played it. They know whether you paused it partway through, whether you ever came back or didn't, what that duration was. All of that data is there. But that is more or less one type of metric that is being measured if that's all you do. Adding the liking, subscribing, commenting, reviewing, all of that stuff is adding additional metrics, right? It's more data, and it's saying, okay, this person, lots of people view the first 2 minutes of their video, that's all they watch, and they never come back, and they never interact in any way, versus this person, people watch their videos all the way through for 10 minutes, they watch the ads when they come on, they come back and they watch it again and again and again, and they interact by liking, and their number of people who view versus the number of people who subscribe to their channel is a really high ratio, and people are leaving comments. It's like that person is going to get recommended way, way more than the person who just had the view and nothing else. Now, that's us, right? We've got like a couple thousand subscribers. We get like not even 1,000 views on each video, but we also do nothing to promote ourselves, and because we don't care. We're like, YouTube is there as an afterthought to us. We're like, well, we're on video chat anyway, so we might as well record, and that's as much as either of us really wants to do about it, and we don't really care, and we're not doing this for money, and we're just kind of doing it for fun, and we kind of like that our audience is small and you know, easy to manage, and we don't have to worry too much about what we say on this podcast. There's not too much chance that we're going to have so much influence that we really ruin the world or get sued over anything. So all of those things are kind of like,
I mean, yeah, we don't get quite the trolls either. That
there's
like
that.
There was a while that we would we still get some, yes, especially on YouTube, which is a horrible place. But there was a while that there was during certain moments of this podcast we would stream things live as we were recording because the service we were using allowed that.
Google Hangouts made it easy.
Yes, and invariably somebody would stumble across us and just start like spewing hate. Like, what is this? This is stupid.
Yep.
These guys are so boring. What are they talking about? I hate it.
Not that I disagree with any of that, but
I'm like, we're not talking to you, number one. And number two,
you could click away.
Yeah, no one's stopping.
And yet more engagement. They engaged with us.
Yeah,
more than most.
Yeah, more than most people. So, you know, we don't have to deal with that either. So.
Yep. Okay. I think that's it. We talked through that one.
Kiran in India. Kiran subscribes to YouTube Premium, and when he checks the playback set... Uh-oh, I took my glasses off so I could rub my eyes.
Now we can't read.
It really itches. When he checks the playback settings options, he now sees enhanced bitrate as an option for the video resolution. Mm-hmm. But has there been any improvement to the audio? He uses the YouTube... Tell you what, I honestly think that the number of people that care about audio quality on the planet is such an infinitesimally small number that when we are all together in a room talking to each other about audio, we think there is lots of us. There are not. There are very, very few.
It's precisely why headphones sell on fashion and not on performance. It's entirely about fashion with headphones.
He uses a YouTube app that is built into his LG OLED TV. Is there any way to see what the bitrate is for audio? If he checks stats for nerds, it shows plenty of info about the video stream, but almost nothing about audio. Yeah, I mean, they are still trying to understand how surround sound works over there at YouTube.
They've given up on it apparently.
Haven't quite mastered the surround sound.
There was Dolby Digital 5.1 on YouTube for a time there, but they just given up on it. They just went back to stereo.
No one cares.
Yeah.
Especially on YouTube when most people are watching on their phone. Who cares?
And it caused occasional problems and glitches and that. So they're just they're done with that. So getting the literal real-time readout of what the bitrate is for the audio, there isn't really a way that I know how to do that. I'm sure somebody out there has Chrome extension or something that they've written, but I don't know about it. I don't know where to point you for something like that. I'm sure somebody out there has done it, but I don't have a resource for that in particular. But what it will show you, at least in those stats for nerds, is what codec is being played back at the time. And with the way, so when you upload something to YouTube, they recompress it on their end. They transcode it into their file formats and they recompress it before they store it on their servers. And I mean, thankfully for us as anybody who's making a video, they take care of making all the lower and higher resolution versions of the video. So whatever quality I uploaded in, there's multiple versions that are available through YouTube. I didn't do any of that. I just uploaded one original file and then they do all the transcoding and up and down scaling and all of that stuff. They take care of that on their end. So you would notice that if you manually drop your video resolution down really low, I think they even give a 144p option on phones, and then there's 240 and 360p or something like that. If you go down to those really lower than standard definition options, you will almost certainly notice that the codec in that stats for nerds for the audio changed, and then when you go to the higher video resolutions, it'll go to a different codec.
You can hear that too.
Yes.
Every once in a while, my bitrate will drop when I'm watching a YouTube video because of whatever, a hiccup in the internet connection or whatever, and I'm like, geez, it looks like crap, and it'll be 360, right? And then I'll manually switch it up to 1080p or 720p or whatever the highest is, and then put it back to auto, and it'll just stay there at the higher resolution because I do have the bandwidth for it. It just had the hiccup. But when you do that, you can hear the audio change dramatically, and
people's
it's
voices sound
usually.
like they're underwater quite often. And so most commonly now what we're seeing is the Opus codec format for audio when you're on YouTube, stereo format. It is a variable bit rate, so that might be exactly what Kiran was asking about, because he's like, can I see the real time, see that variable bit rate going up and down? And I don't have a resource for that. Like I say, maybe somewhere out there someone created an extension, but I don't know about it. But you will very often see it going between the and they put this code in that stats for nerds. It'll say WebM or it'll say Opus codec, and it'll say 249, 250, or 251. And those are just increasing bit rates. The 249 is at a maximum 50 kilobits per second, which is really, really, really low. 250 is 70 kilobits per second, so that's barely acceptable. And then 251 is up to 160 kilobits per second, which is, really quite reasonable. That's better than 128 kilobit MP3 or AAC, so really quite acceptable sound quality on there. And once you get to the, even very often just the 480p, the standard definition, and anything higher than that, they'll be using that 251 codec, the Opus 251 codec. So it at least gives you some ballpark idea, and it tells you the maximum bit rate that you can have. It's better than no information whatsoever, but it is pretty opaque, right? If all you see is Opus 251, what the heck does that mean? But we have a table that I'm linking to that tells you what those bit rates are. There are other codecs that YouTube might use, but that Opus codec is the one they're most commonly using right now.
Okay. He's noticed that if he sets his listening mode to stereo, most YouTube videos seem to sound clearer than if he used Dolby Surround Upmixer. Does Upmixing 2.0 sources to 7.1 immersive audio degrade the sound quality, or is it because the original sound is being spread across more channels? It's more the latter than the former. I don't know if it degrades anything, but if you do this with stereo, actually with anything, but generally with stereo, it's going to try to put the vocals in the center channel, then try to put the other sounds in the other surround channels. I mean, mostly front, left, and right, but also, pull some of the sounds out from behind, to put it behind you. Mm-hmm. It's just instead of having all the sound concentrated in 2 speakers, you end up with it, all around you, and it just kind of sounds quieter. I don't know that it's degraded in any way. It's not like you get less sound quality. You just get more sound from more speakers, which overall the volume is lowered.
Yeah, and the Dolby Surround Upmixer in particular, I tend to quite like what it does with most of its upmixing duties, but it is a format that applies a little bit of reverb into some of the surround and overhead channels. It has a little bit of reverb that goes in there. It is quite frequency limited in terms of what it places into the surround and the overhead channels. So it isn't like just duplicating sounds the way the Aromatic Upmixer is, which is like quite literally just duplicating sounds into additional speaker channels, or the DTS Neural X Upmixer, which also tends to do quite a bit of straight duplication, but also like actually makes the overhead speakers louder than the other sounds, so that you really notice that there's something in those overhead speakers. So it does some volume transitioning as well. But Dolby Surround Upmixer is probably the most subtle of the 3 upmixing choices that we commonly see on our AV receivers, but it does add that tiny little bit of reverb in many situations. So that can be like, if you're really just watching a couple of people talking, having that little bit of reverb added in can definitely make it sound less clear, because they're trying to make it sound like you're in a larger space, but the larger space has like a little bit of echo to it, right? Which means lower clarity. It's certainly temporally, time-wise, drawing out the sounds a little bit longer than the original signal actually said to do. So that could quite easily explain it. There's also just, what are the details of your speaker setup and your room acoustics? Because, of course, if you have a fairly reverberant room and now you're having sound come from more directions, then you're going to be stretching out the time domain as well by virtue of the way your sound system is playing things back. I'm not saying that's the case in your situation, but that could be another explanation for it. So, in general, especially if it's just a couple of people talking, I would probably just play that in basic stereo. There isn't much reason to upmix that sound. But also, the majority of videos that are being put onto YouTube, there are some that are, very well mastered and specifically made because they know what format they're going to be distributing it on. But a lot of other videos, it's like, we didn't like master it specifically for YouTube's compression. And therefore, what gets put into any surround or overhead channels by the Upmixer is entirely up to the algorithm of the Upmixer. It's not like it's coming in a pre-formatted Dolby, the old Dolby Pro Logic, right? Where you could actually have a left total and right total signal where you had matrixed in sounds that are going to get pulled out into the surround and the center channels, where you matrix that ahead of time and then just put it into the stereo format because that an upmixer is going to be applied to it. That isn't really happening on YouTube. So it's entirely up to the algorithm to make its best guess. And sometimes it's going to kind of flub it here and there.
J.Karl asks, what's next for OLED TVs? LG introduced micro lens array in its G3 series, but only at the 55, 65, and 77-inch sizes. Expanding that to the larger and smaller OLED screen sizes seems like the obvious next step, but do we think it will happen in 2024? And will MLA, or micro lens array, for those of you that didn't hear the last sentence, come to the less expensive C4 series? And then what does Samsung Display do to improve its QD OLED panels for 2024? All of this leads up to the question for his personal situation, which is, should you plan to buy an OLED TV this year when Black Friday sales hit, or should we wait until the features and improvements of 2024 models get announced? You should buy a TV when you need a TV.
Sure.
That is... You cannot wait for the new.
It's a little bit like the game consoles.
It's never there. It's always coming. There's always something new. There's
always going to be something better coming eventually.
You can have analysis paralysis. You can have you can wait for features forever, but there will always be a promise of something else because manufacturers want you to be looking forward to their next products. I mean, that's how they create hype. That's how they create desire and demand.
I can promise you this year's 2023's micro lens array G3 and the second generation QD OLED panels from Samsung that are in Samsung and Sony QD OLEDs, like, they are really, really good, beautiful TVs. So will there be at some point in the future a TV that's even better and has even more features that you might want? Yes, it will happen one day. But what you would buy this year during Black Friday in terms of a high-end OLED TV is a beautiful TV. So it's going to be real hard to say that you're suffering from not having a 2024 model. That would be the easy part there. So, I mean, his other questions there, right? Like, do I think that micro lens array is going to come to the C4 series next year? I think there's a pretty good likelihood. Like, they spent many years where the C series and the G series had zero performance differences. It was all just about the chassis and the aesthetics, and zero performance differences. So the idea that micro lens array will come to that, like, what is by far their most popular series of TVs, I think there's a pretty good likelihood. If it didn't happen in 2024 and they wait until 2025 to bring it to the C series, it wouldn't like shock me to my core or anything. Micro lens array was brand new for 2023. But again, another one where I'm like 50-50, right? I wouldn't be surprised either way. If it shows up in the C series, I'd be like, yep, makes perfect sense. If it's not until 2025, I'd be like, okay, took an extra model year. Neither would surprise me. I do expect it'll come to the larger and smaller screen sizes. When it does, that's going to mean it's in the C series, because the greatest range of sizes are in that C series. It only makes sense that when they start manufacturing the 83-inch and 97-inch sizes, that out of that same piece of mother glass, they also make the 48 and the 42-inch screen sizes, that all of that is going to be micro lens array once they start doing that. So I do think it will come to the entire size range. I do think it will come to the C series. My personal guess is that LG likes to go pretty fast, and so I do think it's going to happen in 2024. But if I'm wrong about that, I won't be shocked. So easily you can come back and say, Rob, you're wrong. It didn't happen until 2025. It'll be like, yep, totally understandable. I think the obvious answer for Samsung display with their QD OLED panels is they're going to add micro lens array to it because they didn't for the second generation. And why the heck wouldn't they, and make those QD OLEDs even brighter? So I think that's what they will do. Will it happen next year in 2024? I have a little bit more doubt about that, because this year in 2023, they didn't even necessarily have the second generation panels in all of the 55 and 65 inch sizes. The S90C, the 55 and 65, were still using the first generation panels in many of the units that were out there. So I think they might just try to stabilize what they're doing with the current manufacturing before they make yet another change. I think my personal guess is that 2025 is when we'll see micro lens array in QD OLEDs. But again, if I'm wrong about that, because Samsung likes to go pretty darn fast, if micro lens array shows up in QD OLEDs next year, I won't be shocked. But my personal guess is that micro lens array, yes, to the C series next year, and 2025 for the QD OLEDs from Samsung. Those are my personal guesses.
Okay.
But don't wait. Don't wait. You want a high-end OLED? Get it this year.
So did you answer the second question?
No.
Okay.
It's related.
Samsung's Display's second-generation QD OLED panels are already on par with LG Display's micro lens array panels in terms of peak light output at band. As we said it seems obvious that Samsung will add MLA to their QD OLED panels in the near future to boost their light output even more. So what can LG do at this point to keep up with their W OLED panels?
I'm not sure. I didn't know micro lens array was coming, so that was a
it's almost like we don't have any insider information on this podcast.
Yeah, that was a rather pleasant surprise when that happened. LG doesn't appear, from like the little things that we have seen come out of CES, and that doesn't appear to be like going towards the inkjet printed OLED panels. TCL seems to be at the forefront of that, even though they aren't even an OLED seller at this point, but they seem to be at the forefront of the inkjet printing. Would that help with brightness output? Very unknown. It doesn't really seem to. So, I mean, the other display technology, a couple of ones that we know are coming. Like we have the prototypes already. Apple with their Vision Pro headset is already going towards micro OLED, and those are outlandishly bright. What comes out of those micro OLEDs. Now, part of the micro OLED technology is that it's actually printed in the same way that like silicon chips are, semiconductor chips are. It's a completely different manufacturing process. So that makes sense for the very, very small sizes. That makes sense in a headset. Whether that could be fully scaled up to, TV sizes seems a little unlikely, right? Like, are we going to have gigantic silicon wafers of that size? It seems a little unlikely. So the more likely technology that is coming down the pike is quantum dots that don't rely on having a blue light source that the quantum dots then change into red and green. It's just an electron light source that you get blue, green, and red quantum dots. So it's having, even shorter wavelength than blue light, exciting quantum dots for all three primary colors. Samsung is definitely working on that. That is the next step. LG is working on that too, though. So I think that's going to be like the next big display thing, is what they call electroluminescent or EL quantum dot displays, where there are no OLEDs, there are no LEDs. It is just quantum dots and an electron beam that's exciting those quantum dots directly. That's going to be the next big thing. So that might be what LG does, because they've sort of nailed down their WOLED process, and I think they're going to stick with that and get as much profit out of that at this point as they're able to, and I think they might transition to electroluminescent quantum dot after that.
Kevin says he did not listen to some of our advice about speakers over the years, and as a result, he's now amassed a bunch of speakers he'd like to sell. He recalls we once suggested that using a consignment store to make the process of selling off unwanted gear easier. Do we have any recommendations how to find a good one, and specifically in the greater DC area? So DC is a very large area as far as number of people and let's say variety and number of stores. There could very well be a store that specializes in audio equipment in that area. I don't know that there is. There could be.
Yeah, like we don't have a specific store for us to say go to this one, but in terms of the
reality is,
process.
though, I don't unless you have like extremely high-end speakers that are worth a lot of money.
Which he might. It's not out of the question.
I don't know that many consignment stores would be interested in audio gear, specifically speakers, simply because unlike furniture, which you can look at and touch and see whether or not it's something you want, you have to plug in audio gear and test it out in order to know that it works before you take it home. And I imagine that that's going to be a stopping point for many of these places, simply because they're not going to have the capacity or the desire to let people test out audio gear to make sure it works. So I don't think that consignment is the way to go on this.
Okay.
I have used it for new stuff and for gear, like a furniture. But when I have done this with audio gear, what I have done is done it on a store that does, like, they post it for you on eBay.
Gotcha. Right.
And a lot of those stores have closed down. I have not seen a store that's done that for a long time. But some like shipping companies are the ones that you're going to be looking for, like not necessarily UPS, but like that sort of store where you go there, it's a specifically a shipping company that that you would go to. They would be the ones that you would consign through them.
Right. So more like searching for online consignment as opposed to brick and mortar consignment store.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Because, I mean, I think what perfectly makes sense to me, just reading a little bit into what Kevin's asking, is like, yeah, we can say, okay, there's AVS Forum Classifieds, there's AudioGone, there's US Audio Mart, but you have to do that. I mean, it's like, it's in the same vein as doing it yourself on eBay or through Craigslist. And he's like, I don't really want to deal with that.
I don't blame you. And I don't want to either.
I'm completely in the same boat with you, Kevin, on there. He's like, can I just basically say, here's my stuff to somebody, you go ahead and sell it. Obviously, that consignment person takes a cut of it, and then you give me the remainder. And yeah, I'm not making as much money as if I did all the legwork and sold it myself, but then I don't have to do all the legwork and sell it myself. So yeah, I'll give you a cut of it. Makes perfect sense. So yeah, I think what Tom is saying is absolutely on the money, that searching for online consignment in your area, that should be searchable. That should be something you're able to come up with, and going with it that way makes a lot of sense. So I don't know if that's less help than I ideally would have liked to be able to give. I'd love to be able to just point you to an address and say go there, but I do not know that's not something I do a lot myself. So
right. Yeah. Greg. First up, Greg was happy to hear our response last week when we were talking about 77-inch OLED TV models, and Rob suggests that the best deal right now is Samsung's Q90C QD OLED. since its panel and performance are actually identical to the more expensive S95C, specifically at the 77-inch screen size. Greg wanted to remind everyone that if you're a AAA member, which only costs $50 a year, that Samsung offers discounts. And at the time that Greg checked, the sale price plus the AAA discount brought the price of a 77-inch Samsung S90C down to $2,000. MSRP was $3,600, and current sale prices have it down to $2,500, and the S95C model is currently priced at $38,000. So there's some large price gaps there.
Yeah.
Greg went ahead
$2,000 for the same performance as one that's costing $3,800 right now.
So Greg went ahead and pounced on it. He was coming from a 77-inch LG C8 OLED, so no screen size increase, but he says the improvement in picture quality is obvious, and he's very, very happy with the S90C. According to some folks on the forums, okay, let's just pause there.
Well, this is okay. This is okay.
Usually when you've bought something and then you go to forums, only bad things happen.
This specific thing he's going to mention is okay.
He says, according to the forum people, Samsung is even willing to haggle on the price a bit further if you use the text chat on their website to talk to a salesperson. Supposedly, people have gotten the price down to $1,850, although Greg doesn't have any direct proof of that, but it can't hurt to try the chat before you buy. Yeah. So with all that said, with every other 77-inch OLED option costing at least a few $100s more, LG's B3, for example, is at $2,300. Is there any reason at all to go with something other than the Samsung S90C right now? Dolby Vision, right? That's the only thing missing? Or is there any other performance advantage of a different 77-inch OLED model that could would justify spending more at the moment?
Yeah, so this is specifically at the 77-inch size, right? So the obvious answer is at other screen sizes, different situation. But for the S90C, I completely agree. I think it's the best deal going specifically at the 77-inch size. The one thing I would point to, Dolby Vision, obvious, right? I, along with Greg, don't really care that much because the way that HDR10 ends up looking on the S90C is absolutely more than acceptable. First of all, it can quite easily get to over 1000 nit peaks, so the vast majority of HDR content doesn't need any tone mapping whatsoever. And then the stuff that was mastered to greater than 1000 nit peaks, the Samsung OLEDs do have their version of dynamic tone mapping. So you can still retain the highlight detail, and I care very little that Dolby Vision is not present on the Samsung S90C there. So I'm right in that same boat with you. But that is, if you're just the person who's like, I've got to have Dolby Vision light up on the logo, then that would be the obvious reason. But the one performance difference that I still point to between the quantum dot OLEDs that Samsung is manufacturing and either selling themselves under their brand or through Sony's brand versus LG's OLEDs is, if you have light in the room, ambient light, either sunlight coming in or lights on in the room, just the basic black of the screen when you have ambient light in the room, the second generation quantum dot OLEDs improved on the first generation, but they still just wash out a little bit. It's not terrible. It's better than most LCDs, but if you are looking at it, that screen just without even anything playing, is no longer perfectly inky black. Once you have ambient light in the room, it just raises to a dark gray. That's just some of the internal reflection in the glass and all that type of stuff. LG's OLEDs, other than the micro-lens array actually made that a tiny bit worse on the G3s, where they go to a very, very, very dark gray. But the ones that don't have the micro-lens array are completely inky black with ambient light in the room. And the micro-lens array G3s are still blacker than the quantum dot OLEDs. So that is something that, for me personally, helps me still favor LG's OLEDs that little bit. I don't, even in my theater room, don't watch in pitch blackness. I have a bias light on in my theater, or if I'm watching the display I have in my living room, I've definitely got light on in there, and I love being able to look at a black image or just a fully black screen, and it is completely inky, space-like black. And the quantum dot OLEDs don't quite do that if you have ambient light in the room, but that's about it. If you're watching in a darkened room, it's not going to matter whatsoever. And I completely agree. The S90C at the 77-inch size specifically is a champion right now.
Dan. So Dan says, our podcast is called AVRant, right? Well, Dan would like to rant. Dan does professional installations. While we often mention products from HD Fury and HDMI cables from Monoprice, he tends to use products aimed at the pro market from brands like AV Pro Connect and Binary, but ultimately the features and functions are the same. He also has testing equipment. For HDMI, he uses a $2,500 tester from Meridio,
yes.
Meridio, whatever. Called the Fox and Hound, which is more or less there just to show him the detailed EDID whenever he's trying to figure out why HDMI isn't working. Meridio test pattern generators can show that information too, but they're even more expensive. Anyways, recently he was helping a client with an upgrade. The client had been using an Integra, a DRX2 receiver with a 55-inch Sony X900D TV, and their sources were an Xfinity cable box, a first-generation Apple TV 4K, and a Sony 3D, not 4K, Blu-ray player. So 3D Blu-ray player. It only plays 3D Blu-rays, whatever. The equipment was all positioned at the back of the room, so a 15-meter HDMI cable was used. They went with an AudioQuest Forest for that.
Well, there's your problem.
There's your problem right there.
Anything AudioQuest. Yeah. Now, honestly, their HDMI cables are perfectly fine and certified, but I just can't ever recommend going with AudioQuest. It's so expensive for nothing.
Yeah. The system has never worked smoothly. At first, Dan had to program remote control macros. The TV and receiver would always turn off completely if you wanted to switch from one source to another. If you left the TV and receiver on and simply changed inputs to go to another source, the audio and video would drop out, and the only way to get it working was to always power off completely and then power on the desired source first, and then the TV, and then the Integra receiver by using one of its input buttons so that it would power on directly to the correct input. It was functional that way, but clunky. So he put a Band-Aid on it in the form of an AV Pro Connect EDID device. They offer an inline connector or an HDMI extender, and he used the less expensive inline device. The thing is, to program it correctly, he had to use his Fox and Hound HDMI tester to make sure all the settings were adjusted correctly. It certainly wasn't something the client could have done themselves, unless they were willing to pay thousands of dollars for basically a one-time use thing that they would set up and then immediately purge all that from the memory banks. Now the system functioned as you expect, although still not perfectly. The audio would drop out once in a while, less often, and the video seemed to work fine, but they'd sometimes have to switch to a different source and back, or do a power cycle to get the audio back. It was kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. So
this client wanted to upgrade to an up-to-date TV and receiver with all the latest 4K HDR goodness. They went with the new 55. First of all, these TVs are far too small.
Okay. I mean, they probably somebody with a TV cabinet, right? A built-in space that limits the size.
It's infuriating how small these TVs are. So they went with the 55-inch Sony OLED and the Integra DRX 2.4. First, can we get away from the Integra stuff anyways? But anyways, I mean, Integra's fine, but it's very custom installer friendly, and that's why that's being sold here. No screen size increase or more speakers added. This was basically all just an HDMI 2.1 upgrade from a function standpoint. The Xfinity box was upgraded to our latest 4K box. I want to blame the Xfinity box for everything, by the way.
He's going to.
My parents have I think I don't know what cable, but I think it's Xfinity. It doesn't work with anything. It doesn't work with anything. You cannot get anything to work with the dang thing. It's on constantly.
Spoiler
because
alert.
They can't turn it off. The remote won't turn it off. Like the Harmony remote won't turn it off at all. Anyways, the Xfinity box was upgraded to the latest 4K box, and a new 15-meter HDMI cable was installed, this time a fiber optic cable to maintain full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth over the distance. They didn't feel any need to upgrade to Apple TV 4K, and they don't use discs that often anymore, so the 3D Blu-ray player stayed as well. Apple TV 4K worked. That's the end of the good news.
I mean, I'm not laughing at you or them. I'm laughing because we can commiserate.
I've been here.
Yeah, I believe you.
This is why I have. Next time my parents call me over to fix their stupid remote, I'm going to be like, okay, we're calling a custom installer, and you're going to call them from now on, and you can pay them. Because I'm not getting paid enough. Okay, so the Apple TV 4K worked, and then that was it. So the new 4K and Xfinity box seemed to wreak havoc. It didn't matter what he tried. everything failed with the new Xfinity box connected. There's actually an Xfinity app available for Apple TV 4K, so they just wound up using that and disconnecting the cable box entirely. Then he went to use the 3D Blu-ray player, and that wouldn't show up at all anymore. You would have to switch the Integra's HDMI inputs down to standard bandwidth and then switch them back to 8K enhanced bandwidth to use with the Apple TV 4K, which is far from a seamless process. He wanted to drive the HDMI's to HDMI's headquarters, grab one of the engineers, drag them to this nice client's home and say, fix this. You're not leaving until you do. How can it be this bad? This isn't even a terribly complicated system. 3 perfectly normal and typical sources, an AV receiver from a well-established brand, and the Sony TV. How can that have this many problems? That's mostly just a rhetorical question. He just needed to vent about it to someone who might understand. But can we think of anything at all to alleviate some of this frustration?
I mean, yeah, we get it.
Honestly, this was a lot to read, and I'm like I'm scrolling back and realizing how much I just read and going, wow. So this is. Unfortunately, this is like you are Reddit right now. You are all the questioners on Reddit, and people come to Reddit and they're like, they have what I would call a reasonable system. This is a system that has been built up over years. It's not like it's like they never really got it to work perfectly, but they got it to work pretty good, and then they made a change, and it's because they upgraded something. But they only upgraded the one thing they needed to upgrade. And maybe they had been upgrading a little bit here and there, but it was fine. But then they make that one change that's like pushes it over the edge. And in this case, this is exactly what happened. You're like, okay, I'm going to upgrade the TV, and I know I want to get all the 4K stuff, so I'm going to upgrade the receiver. And that way I'll know that I get all the 4K stuff. I won't have to do any janky HDMI CEC workarounds where I plug things directly into the TV so it can go back via HDMI ARC, ARC in order to get the audio. I won't do any of that. I can plug everything in the receiver. It's going to be fine. And then you do it, and you're like, and now all my old devices are just like, it should work. It should be backwards compatible. HDMI claims it's backwards compatible. It is backwards compatible. Except, not really. No, not really. It's not really backwards compatible.
Like, it's a horrible suggestion because you shouldn't have to physically rearrange your life. Right. But it's the only one that I would like. You're a pro installer. You know what I'm going to say, and this client doesn't want to do it, and you don't want to do it. But we both know, and for the benefit of listeners who might not know, things do. And this is certainly not perfect, but they do, in terms of at least not getting dropouts and stuff like that, work better if you plug all the sources directly into the TV and then rely on an optical audio or, God help us, the HDMI ARC or
optical
e-ARC
audio
connection.
Every single time. I don't care that it's lower resolution. Your clients don't care either. I guarantee you that.
You'll still get 5.1 at least, and that might be all they're doing because this is not I don't think it's an Atmos setup with what they mentioned. They didn't increase the number of speakers, so 5.1 is probably enough for the signal. But like that is the way, because as soon as you introduce an HDMI switch, an HDMI repeater, an AV receiver that's acting as both a switch and repeater, I can't tell you why. It's just like you. I'd love to be able to shake somebody at HDMI and say, why on earth did you not anticipate that people might have more than one source? Because that seems like a thing people might want to do. But certainly the way to get this functioning typically more stably is to plug all the sources directly into the TV, have it do all the HDMI switching. The Sony TV will let you have the thing where one of its HDMI inputs is at the standard bandwidth and works with that 3D Blu-ray player, while the other 3 HDMI inputs are at the enhanced 4K or 8K bandwidth. It'll let you do that where it's not all of them or none of them, like it can be in the AV receivers. So, that's the way to alleviate the frustration, but it's far from ideal. And then we all know if you do end up using that HDMI ARC connection, it's still not going to be trouble-free. There's still going to be glitches from time to time in the audio when you have to rely on it to send the signal back to the AV receivers. So, Yeah, I mean, I guess that there are the instances where having the Sony TV connected to a Sony ES receiver does work more smoothly, because anything to do with HDMI CEC, they do like to have it brand on brand. But those two suggestions are about it, and it's terrible.
Well, I mean, the only other thing I can think is essentially plugging everything into like some sort of HD Fury or that sort of, plugging everything into that.
What he tried to do originally.
Yeah, and then if that doesn't work, then where are you? And then I know, like, you're a custom installer and you have access to certain brands and everything else. That's limits you in some ways. And what Rob's saying is absolutely correct. If you take a Samsung TV and you plug it into a Samsung like all-in-one DVD player, Blu-ray player or whatever it is, thing, it's amazing how well the HDMI CEC works. It works really well most of the time because it's on brand. It's the same brand. And once you start getting away, and that's like, we're right back to like the home automation thing that we talked about at the very top of this podcast, where we're like, things should work. Yes. This is all the same stuff. It should work together. You're connecting the same dang cable. You've got the HDMI cable. It should work. Why isn't it working? Nobody's testing that crap.
Well, I mean, and I suppose as a pro installer, the other suggestion I could make, and I mean, this client doesn't sound like a mega buck client, right? They're not spending all the money for $300,000 displays and stuff like that. But the suggestion would be like, it sounds like he took one EDID device and put it between the AV receiver and the TV, because that's the single connection through which everything goes. Makes perfect sense. But sometimes, like in the case where you have the stupid Xfinity box that wants to interfere with everything, and the 3D Blu-ray player that is only ever going to work on standard bandwidth and refuses to work if you put it on enhanced bandwidth, which is one of the reasons why they left that setting even in there for 3D Blu-ray players, like putting an like in my case, I'd be pointing to an HD Fury Doctor HDMI device, or the same thing from the AV Pro Connect, that EDID device on the output of each source.
Right.
Right. So that means buying multiples of them and putting it closer to the source end of the signal chain, but that would be the other way to do it, so that the source is never having a glitch in terms of, okay, what am I supposed to send out? It's always getting that same EDID specific to that source. Yes. And then that goes into your switch, which is your AV receiver. So that would be the other way. It means spending a bit more money, but if it makes it work properly, could be worth it.
It's just ludicrous, though.
Oh, nobody's disagreeing how stupid it is.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
It's banging your head against a wall, baffling that we're still having this conversation.
Yeah,
we have had this conversation for
this client
years.
Hired him to do the job, right? And it's like, and he's like, it's still frustrating as heck, and I can't really get it to where I'm happy for it to hand it off to my client. It's silly. It's
the Xfinity box in particular is just those people. And by those people, I mean the cable
Comcast.
the Comcast, the cable people, all of those people. They literally don't care. They're like, we assume that you are going to connect this directly to your TV, and there's going to be nothing else in your system. And it is the
singular source that ever gets used.
Yes. And they just like, we will pay the least amount for everything else in the system.
And that you don't have a separate audio system. You're just using the TV's built-in speakers. That's
right.
Truly all they anticipate.
Julian, a couple of weeks ago,
we didn't get Dan's second question.
There's another question?
The last part of it. Yeah, there was a part B there.
Dan was reading a forum thread from an Audiophile who was gushing about their new expensive cables. The brand was literally Snake something or another. He couldn't help but immediately think of snake oil. So Dan knows better. The only thing that an expensive cable could do to the signal to make it an audible difference would be make the signal worse, which is something I've been saying for years in some way. Like I always say, he says, to act as some sort of passive EQ. But this guy was just so darn happy. He was saying it was bliss, a slice of heaven on earth, and there was so much more to the music. Maybe he's misguided. Maybe he's just fooling himself. But Dan couldn't help feeling envious. That's the feeling he wants all of his clients to experience. He wants everyone to be over the moon and thrilled that they spent good money to put an audio system or theater in their room or in their home. HDMI seems to be trying its hardest to ruin that. From Dan's perspective, and then pretty much everybody else's. And he can't imagine recommending to a client that they spend thousands on cables that he knows don't actually do what they claim. But is there something to all of that? Like, how can we argue with this audiophile guy's subjective experience that was so pleasure-inducing that he wanted to shout about it from the proverbial mountaintop? Okay. you can do this. Okay, first of all, you can absolutely do this for your clients, and it is all some psychological manipulation is all it is. Okay, we and I have I'll link it up article on the psychology of home theater, and about sale, and another one article about sales tactics in high end stores. My dog is chasing somebody through her dreams and is yipping over there. The key is to prime people. The key is to prime people and to make little changes that make a difference and that they won't expect will make a difference. I'll give you an example outside of audio. I used to know a guy who was like a distributor of wine, and he would do wine tastings with people, and he would put the wine he wanted to sell, which he would hype up and give all sorts of, tell people what to expect when they taste it and everything else. He would put that in because there's scientific, research behind the shape of the glass affecting how you taste what's inside of it. Okay. And certain wines can be negatively or positively affected by the glass that they're in based on how the smell wafts out and how how it hits you and all this other stuff. So he would put his wine in the good glass, and he put the other wines in glasses that were non-optimal to what the type of wine that was in there. They might look nice, but it was non-optimal to that. So it wouldn't be a massive change, but it would be enough that between the psychological of what he's talking about and then the physical, the objective of what he's done with the glasses would make a humongous difference. People would be like over the moon about their wine, and then they would go forward from there and do what you're explaining here, and like hard sell these wines to customers, saying,
they
based on their experiences. So you can do this with audio as well, and you don't have to be quite as manipulative as the glass thing, just by setting it up. Just by picking the right content and then setting it up beforehand and telling people, okay, this is what you want to listen for, and these are the things that you're going to hear, and you're going to be amazed by that, and blah, blah, blah. And some people won't be affected by it. Like, if you do that to me, I'd be like, you got to get out of my house. But most people will. It's an effective sales
they'll nod
tactic.
along, and they'll hear it, and they'll buy it fully.
And you can absolutely do that. As far as this guy and his cables or whatever, there's just so much psychologically invested in us spending money on things that when we spend money on something, we want to believe that we are not an idiot who's just wasted a bunch of money.
It's also entirely possible that as an audiophile, his previous cables that he just replaced
were crap.
Doing some
really bad
EQ stuff to his speakers, and the new ones really are an improvement. That is not out of the question in this scenario.
So that's definitely possible, yes.
The other thing I would say, which, it sounds as though Dan is quite a moral person and might not feel comfortable doing this, but I could say in a way that truly makes an objective difference that would likely make most of your clients happy, before you change any of their system, like even if all they have is a TV with the TV's built-in speakers and you're coming in to put in a whole system, I would get them in the way they have their system right now today to turn it on and set things to the volume that they like to listen at right now today with their current system, and measure that, see what the average SPL is at their desired rate and where they set the volume number, because most people are going to set their volume to the same number always. It doesn't matter if you come in and tell them you calibrated it and now 0 on the volume dial is like the reference setting, and it's perfectly fine if they listen at -15 or whatever, but they are going to go back to whatever number they're used to. So you make a note of that. What is the number they're used to, and what is the SPL they're used to? And then you set it up so that your new system that you put it in there, when they put it to the same number on the volume dial that they're used to, is like 3 decibels louder than their old system. And they're going to be over the moon with how amazing their new sound system is, because that is the way they're going to use it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Julian. A couple of weeks ago, we went through Julian's questions about upmixing and what listening mode settings we thought he should use on his Yamaha RX A3070 receiver. His room is about 13 by 14 with 7-foot ceiling, so small. And as we correctly deduced, he is actually using a single surround back speaker and one pair of present speakers, so it's a 6.2.2 configuration. The thing is, his wife won't tolerate the sofa being pulled away from the back wall, so that single surround back speaker is actually on the floor right behind the sofa and firing straight up. Okay.
Yeah.
That is actually not a bad way to set that up if you have to do that, but the better way is to unplug it.
It is really not doing what a surround back speaker is supposed to do at this point. Really, really not.
I have a better idea. Put it in a different room. How about that? Put it in the bathroom. The surround speakers cannot be placed symmetrically, so one of them is slightly behind the sofa on the side wall, and the other one is slightly in front of the sofa. The front present speakers are a pair of KEF T101 super flat speakers, and they're mounted in the front corners of the room. So we would call this in the business non-optimal placements.
That's correct. And he's well aware of that, yeah.
So Julian is well aware his speaker placement is not ideal. The in-ceiling speakers are absolutely a no-go, and the present speakers can really only go in the corners. The thing is, he really wants to improve his sense of immersion. I guess, to be honest with you, get rid of some of these speakers. The way things are now, he isn't sure he's ever actually heard anything coming from a single on the floor straight up surround back speaker, and the front present speakers have not really been noticeable either. He wants to feel as though he is completely surrounded and enveloped by sound, including a sense of height and sounds coming from overhead. So in this setup, what's his best approach to achieve that? He hadn't realized his single surround back speaker doesn't play anything at all when using Dolby Surround or DTS Neural X Upmixer, so he's glad we mentioned that. Does that mean he would benefit from adding a second surround back speaker? It would also have to go on the floor and fire straight up. His other idea would be to put a second pair of present speakers in the rear corners of the room, and since he hasn't been impressed all that much with the KEF T101 super flat speakers, he was thinking to get 2 pairs of KEF's wedge-shaped Q50A speakers and mount those in each of the 4 corners of his room. Will that give him a better better height effects and the overall sense of immersion he's hoping for? Oh my God, I need to drink something.
Tom's got
wow, that just went, wow. It's better to go 7.2.2 or 5.2.4. Rob, you start, I'll come back.
You bet, yeah. So Tom and I are going to be in full agreement on this one that you simply do not have surround back speakers in this setup, whether one or a pair, no surround back in here. You really should, if you are going to have surround back speakers whatsoever, have at least 4 feet of space behind the back of your seat to the wall behind you. That is not the scenario that you have. You are going to be better off, full stop, with no surround back. So that's number one. Second part is, it really would be nice to be able to have your surround speakers, your side surround speakers, a little bit more optimally placed. I understand there's got to be physical problems in the way, but I'm thinking, can they actually go on the back wall? Because if your seats are essentially pushed up against the back wall, it sounds like maybe you got 6 inches of space, so the speaker was able to fire upwards behind it, but it's a minimal amount of space behind the seat to the back wall. There is nothing wrong with putting your surround speakers on the back wall at that point. They are not going to sound like they're coming from the wrong direction. That is going to be very, very much the angle that they're supposed to be at. So I'm even thinking, could you take, because this is like a physical consideration, I don't know exactly what's going on his back and side walls, but he was saying like the upper corners are free. He could put speakers in the upper rear corners. So I'm wondering, can you actually take those super flat KEF T101 speakers, and physically would those allow you to better position them as your surrounds, right? And I would have them elevated. I would have them not just elevated the minimum amount to give you a clear line of sight from the tweeter of the surround speaker to every head on the couch. I would actually elevate them a good 2 to 2.5 feet above everyone's heads, just like we used to do all the time when we just had 5.1 speaker setups, and that was as high as we could go. That is what I would do here, and I would stop at 5.2. I love the 0.2. You still want to have the uniformity across your couch, and the 0.2 and the subwoofers is going to help you do that, but I would stop at 5.2. With the surrounds, now both of them physically behind your seat, instead of one of them slightly in front of the seats, as it is right now, and elevated, you are going to get a better sense of immersion and sounds coming from above you and all around you than adding Atmos is going to do for you in this room. You are going to be better off and have a better experience and a more enveloping and immersive experience just stopping at 5.2 in this setup. And if just repositioning the KEF T101 speakers lets you get better positioning for your surround speakers, or maybe the wedge-shaped KEF speakers that you were thinking of getting anyway, the Q50As that can be easily wall-mounted and have the angle to fire down a bit, if those can be mounted on your back wall at the proper angles for where surround speakers should go, which is in a 5.1 setup, 110 to 120 degrees, slightly behind your seats. I'm thinking that might be doable. That might be basically the rear corners. It sounds like in this setup, that could be very close to those rear corners where you were thinking of putting the Q50A wedge speakers anyway. Put them there, but have them just as your surrounds and stop. I would absolutely stop at 5.2. I don't know if Tom's going to disagree, but I have my doubts that he would.
Well, obviously not. If you've listened to me at all, you know that I often advocate for a 5-point system in a small room. This is a perfect example of basically making things worse and trying to make things better or having all the technology going at the same time.
Who could be blamed? He can't be blamed. It's all being marketed at him. We're
That is
talking
exactly
about
right.
Atmos all the time on this pod. Even if we're the only thing he listened to, we're talking about Atmos all the time. How could he not want it?
I have an article started, and I'm going to finish it this week. And it's I often write the title of the article, and then I give myself a couple of notes or a link to what gave me the idea for the article. And then that's just, and I usually come up with like a cover image for it, and then I let it sit on my computer, and then when I get to it, I get to it. So I have one started right now. In fact, I just looked at it this morning. I was going to write it, but I wrote a different one instead. And it's the title of the article is Atmos worth it? And the single note I wrote underneath it is no.
And I mean, there are people who will absolutely argue with that. And I can even fall into the camp where I say, okay, now that I'm used to Atmos, if I take it away, I kind of would like to have it back. I will completely say, Rob H., can completely be happy and live with a 5.2 setup. I will unequivocally say that I can do that, but you know, if there's no restrictions on it, I'm still going to have an Atmos setup. There's still a little bit that I enjoy about it. But yeah, that's where I fall on that. I will just say, if you cannot get it out of your mind that you want to have Atmos light up on the front of your AV receiver, and I get it. To me, that's reason enough, just wanting it to happen, and you've got the AV receiver that can already do it. My suggestion to you then would be, maybe still go ahead and get one pair of those Q50A speakers and do exactly what I said. Mount them. Maybe it's in the rear corners or on the rear wall so that both of them are behind your seat and they are your surrounds and they are still going to be elevated a bit. Maybe in this scenario that I'm just going to suggest now, you lower them a little bit, maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet above your heads, but have them there as your surrounds, and then take those T101 speakers and because you were saying you can't do in-ceiling speakers, but those T101s you could mount on the ceiling, and they are super, super flat, and they're going to be quite easy to have up there, and maybe use some ghost wire so that you really don't see the wires that are going to them, and do things that way, and have them more or less right above you. Because if what you want to do is notice a greater sense of sounds coming from above you, you want top middles. That's what you want. Front heights are going to be one of the least impressive things you're ever going to hear when it comes to adding speakers to your system.
I've never said those words. Those words have never come from me.
So I'm saying a minimal amount of purchasing going on here, some repositioning for sure.
Yes.
My real advice is stop at 5.2, but if you've got to have Atmos light up, I would reposition those T101s to be top middles directly above you. That'll make them the most noticeable that overhead sounds can be.
I honestly don't think that's worth it either. I'm going to be honest with you.
That's not my real answer, but I could see somebody just being like, I've got to have Atmos light up. I get it.
Your hesitation when you hear this advice is going to be, but I want overhead sounds. Right. I want sounds to come from overhead, just like the Atmos speakers. I want them to be up there. I want Atmos I want to have that Atmos experience. And I will counter with, we had speakers that did just a fine job putting sounds above us well before Atmos was ever a thing, and it was 5.1.
Elevated surrounds.
Yes.
It was elevated surrounds. I will always go back to the DVD of the Nicole Kidman movie, The Others,
Yes.
And there is that scene where somebody stomps across the floor that is above the characters, right? They're like in a basement, and it sounds like somebody is stomping across the floor above them. That was 5.1. It was Dolby Digital. It was on a DVD. It absolutely was not Atmos. And if you had your home theater set up with elevated surround speakers, the way all home theaters were supposed to be set up back then when we stopped at 5.1, you were 100% convinced that someone was stomping across the ceiling of your own room. It was absolutely immersive and absolutely sounded like it was coming from above you. Completely convincing. So it can be done. Just elevate your surrounds and stop.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think this is the way to go. I think that by trying to shoehorn more speakers in here, you're putting the speakers that you do have in non-optimal places, which breaks the surround sound immersion that you're going for, rather than having more speakers in worse places, have fewer speakers in the right place. And then when you do that, you will have a better sense of immersion and surround than you would by in any system having speakers in the wrong place. I cannot stress that enough. All right. We don't have any questions left, so that's it for this week.
We managed to go well over 2 hours. We're so silly. I predicted it, and it's exactly what happened.
Well, that's because you were talking too much. I mean, we all
It was, absolutely. I completely agree. I didn't rush myself, and look what happens.
Look what happens. And I wasn't paying attention. The dogs keep looking at me like, when are we going to go out again? And the guys are back.
Soon.
I think they're
very
out there.
soon.
All right. This, I guess we'll finish this up. So this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your question answered. All you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Is there anything else?
Listeners of the week. Thank him once.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I scrolled back up. Listeners of the week. I thank our listeners of the week. Thank Kevin for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, as well as our 136 patrons over at patreon.com.
That is right, Kevin. Thank you very much for your PayPal donation, and patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, it's a big thanks to our 136 patrons over there.
So we thank Eddie, and Eddie, I guess, thanks us for testing out his code and making sure it worked for
That's
that
right.
movie.
Thank you, Eddie.
We also thank those who sent us notes of gratitude, including J.Karl, Julian, and Vince. Thank you for thanking us.
That's right, J.Karl, Julian, Vince, thank you very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. Definitely appreciated. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.